Hello YouTube, this is me, Audiobook is Live. I'd like to thank you guys for supporting me and liking and subbing to my channel. Now, check out my Patreon. For $7 you have access to all my novels. Yes, my novels, your naughty ones, you name it. Everything. Now then, you guys probably seen I'm doing premieres. Is that good for you guys or no? Do leave that in the comments in the video so I know if I should do more premieres or not. Now, I'm pretty sure you guys see me post on my new Discord channel. Do join my Discord channel so I can, because I have some new ideas for some new channel ideas. So do go there, and also you can request novels there for anything you like. Also, do leave a like and support. Now back to the video. Have a good day.
The morning passed by slowly. There were plenty of people who came around to browse, but they didn't get many buyers. It was clear their little shop was probably doing the worst. But they still got a few sales and were able to attract some kids with pocket money once they saw them playing with the toys they made. It annoyed Ben that his statues weren't selling too well considering the price was pretty low, but not many of the adults were giving his area a look, with parents occasionally coming to pull the children away. He had talked Thera into a small game of frisbee. Although given that the table was about 6 feet long, they didn't have much real throwing distance to work with. Still, it managed to pass the time and distract him from the conversation they had in the morning. He hadn't planned to share his story, but it had felt good to get his feelings off his chest. Taking time to talk about your problems certainly helped, but now he had a new one. Thera had seemed uncomfortable since the conversation. He wasn't sure what to do about it, and he didn't mean to create a bad atmosphere, so he was at a loss. "I think I should go," she suddenly spoke up after passing the frisbee back to him. "Oh sure. Sorry if my tale made you feel uncomfortable," he said, a little down that she was leaving already. "Wait, it isn't that." She yelled in a hurry to explain herself. "I think a lot of people aren't shopping here because I'm around. You'll probably have better luck if I go home." "Oh, is that all? Then don't worry about it. Plenty of kids are buying the tops and yo-yos. It may be disappointing that not many people are buying the statues, but I wasn't originally planning on selling them anyway, so it's not a big deal. But, well, if you want to leave, I won't stop you, but you shouldn't let others not liking you keep you from living your life, you know? For what it's worth, I'm enjoying your company." It was an embarrassing thing to say. She didn't know how he could manage it with a straight face, but she felt herself smile under her hood. "All right, I'll stick around. So what will you do with all the leftovers when the day is over?" "Probably store them in the shop. As long as people ask where our buyers got their toys from, they will hopefully direct them to me. It would be a nice way to get a little side money. Falk knows some merchants too, so maybe some of them would buy up my stock." "That's a good idea. Uncle has some good connections." They continued to talk like that for a while, just passing the hours with idle chit-chat and the occasional sale, when they were eventually interrupted by an unruly customer. "Oh, not now," Thera muttered under her breath, and it didn't take long to see why. "So you're still working together? This must be some sort of record for you, Thera," Sko said as he walked up to their table. "But you should still leave the guy alone before anything bad happens." "Sko, we're just trying to enjoy the market. If you're not going to buy something, then buzz off," she told him with an exasperated sigh. He was alone for now at least. The 2 women he was with when they first ran into him a month ago were nowhere to be seen, but Ben wasn't in the mood to deal with this. Still, he would be civil as long as he was a customer. "Pardon me, sir, but are you interested in anything we're selling? If so, I would be happy to help you out," he said with his best customer service smile. "Look, guy, I asked around. Your name's Ben, right? Why not come with me for a bit? Let's have a talk." "Thanks, but I have to mind my table and all. Is there anything I can do for you?" He saw a vein start to bulge on the 4-armed man's forehead as he tried to politely brush him off. "Look, man, I'm just trying to help you here. Thera's got her claws in you, and if you don't get out soon, you're going to end up like Roan. I warned that asshole off multiple times. Whatever happened to him is his own problem," Thera almost shouted, full of indignation. "He may not have been a good guy, but you sent him off his fucking rocker. The same thing's going to happen to this one if you stick around." Ben placed his hands on the tabletop and took a deep breath. It looked like things weren't going to end as peacefully as he would have liked, so he may as well get a rise out of him. "Listen, man, you're either a customer or a nuisance. If you're a customer, buy something, and if you're a nuisance, then get lost. You're blocking potential buyers." He tried to sound as rude and dismissive as he could to really get the point home, and he got exactly what he was looking for. "Listen, you dash," he started to say as he threw all 4 of his hands onto their table, before everything came tumbling down. The front legs of it broke and all of the toys and statues he had made fell to the ground, most of them breaking in the process. Thera was outraged to see all of Ben's work be damaged and destroyed like that while Sko stood there stunned. She was about to start tearing into him, but Ben yelled out first. "Hey, are there any guards around? We're having a bit of an issue." Ben yelled, knowing full well there was at least one station nearby just in case any problems like this occurred, but it seemed there were also a few off-duty who broke off from their families to see what the commotion was. The one on duty looked at the mess of broken stone scattered around before turning to Ben. "All right, what exactly happened here?" Ben pointed an accusatory finger towards the man and told his tale. "This guy came up and started harassing me and my co-worker before breaking my table. Look at this mess. How am I supposed to sell any of this now?" He tried to put on the saddest look he could while he stared down at the destruction of all his hard work. It wasn't hard. He was genuinely a bit angry at the moment. What matters is if it would pay off. The guard for his part was professional about the matter and listened to Sko's side as well. "And do you have anything to say about what happened?" "I didn't mean to break his crap. I just wanted to get him to stop working with the girl." "And why did that lead you to breaking the table?" "Guh, I didn't mean to. I must have put in a bit more strength than I thought." "Huh. All right, you both separate, but wait nearby. I'm going to talk with the other tables in the area and then we'll sort this mess out." He left to talk to the people in the surrounding area. Thera was simmering with rage, and it looked like the girl Sko was with the first time they met ended up finding him. "Sko, what sort of mess did you get yourself into? We told you to just leave them alone today, didn't we?" "I just wanted to talk to the guy was all. I didn't mean for anything to happen," he said awkwardly. While they had their talk, the guard came back and pulled them together. "All right, after talking to the other tables, it sounds like you came to cause problems. I don't care if it was an accident or not. Ultimately, you destroyed all of their merchandise, so I'll give you the option of either paying it off or performing however much community service it would take to cover the costs." I'll pay. How much is it?" The statues were probably the second most expensive items on the table that broke, next to the children's guitars, and it looked like the kites were damaged too. At least the yo-yos and tops were fine, but it wasn't going to be cheap to pay off. He had been selling the statues at the equivalent of $20 apiece, with 48 of them smashed as well as the other things. He was looking at a bit more than the average weekly pay of a rank 5 adventurer. "Is it really that much?" Sko asked when he heard the price. "Looking at the guy's work, I would say you're actually getting a good deal," the guard said as he picked up one of the less damaged pieces. "There's some nice craftsmanship here." "Well, thank you," Ben said, not having expected the compliment. "If you're ever interested, come by the Fox shop. I always have a few on hand." "I'll keep that in mind." "So do you have the money?" Sko turned to look at his companions for a moment. "Think you could help me out a bit?" he asked the girls. They looked far from impressed, but they pulled out their cards nonetheless. "You're paying us back after our next few hunts. You really need to have some sort of savings in place. Don't just waste it all on new gear and booze." He stood there and took the verbal lashing from his companions as they all tapped their cards against Ben's until the necessary funds were added. With that done, Sko and his team turned to go before the guard stopped them. "Not so fast. You covered the price of his items, but you still have to deal with breaking the table. That's town property and all. You have the same option, of course, pay it off or work it off. Either way, we need to talk to the event organizer." He looked even more defeated when he looked to his friends. "A little help, girls?" Instead, they completely ignored him. "What do you say we try the stall over there next? I hear they have good Crombus buns." "Sure. After let's check out the busker before his show's done. I've heard a lot of good things about his juggling act." And with that, they left hand in hand as their companion was dragged off to settle his debts. "All right, that was a lot funnier than I thought it would be." Ben laughed as he turned to Thera, who was still filled with anger. "How can you be so calm? He just broke all of your work." "Don't worry about it. Anyway, now that everything's sold, want to wander around for a bit?" She tried to suppress her anger. She had been looking forward to seeing the market, and she was just thinking that she should try harder to get along with Ben. If he had no problem with what happened, then she should try to move past it. They spent a couple hours looking around the different tables that were set up and ultimately had a lot of fun. Thera hadn't been to an event like that in ages, and Ben was seeing a lot of new food and art for the first time. When noon rolled around, they took their cart back to Fox shop, and Ben grabbed what they would need for their hunt when Thera spoke up. "Are you sure you're okay with what happened? I still feel like if all of my hard work was destroyed like that, I would be pissed." Ben took a moment to think before speaking. "Well, since we aren't at the market, it should be fine to tell you, but don't go spreading it around. I wanted it to happen." "What?" she asked in confusion. I piled up a bunch of enchantments on the part of the table legs near him. It was my first time doing it on an area I wasn't directly touching, so the mana cost was drastically higher, and it was a lot harder to pile them up in the right areas, but it worked out pretty well if I do say so myself. Wait, why though? She didn't understand how he could let the things he had worked so hard on break so casually. He held up 3 fingers and started counting them off. Well, he was being a dick to you. He was being a dick to me, and it seemed like a good way to make some money. Plus now he'll probably think twice before giving us trouble again. She couldn't help it. Thera immediately burst into laughter to think that he did all that just to screw over Sko. It was the first time Ben heard it. Their afternoon hunt following the market hadn't gone exceptionally well. They were still using the bear traps, but trying to get a creature to walk into one took a lot more luck than the previous pit trap strategy, and Ben was still trying to figure out the best way to make different animals fall for them. The problem with using bait was that if he put it on the trap, they might get suspicious and walk away, or just grab it without putting enough pressure on it to set it off. Just putting it nearby was no good either, because any monster was more likely to walk around it than over it, but he was confident that after a few more hunts he would figure something out. For the time being, though, they took a little walk along the river, trying to figure out where might make a good hunting grounds in the future. At least that's what they both pretended they were doing. Thera had spent most of their time in the woods debating whether or not she should try lowering some of her emotional walls and let Ben know more about her, and why she didn't generally try getting close to people. If he knew and could still accept her, then maybe they really could be friends. Gods know it had been a long time since she'd had one. Ben, for his part, knew there was something on her mind at the moment. She had been distracted for most of their hunt and figured it would be good to let her sort out whatever she had been thinking on. He was more than happy to use the time to carve a few new statues while they walked. He was already pretty familiar with the area and had a good idea of where some of the smaller creatures could be found if one looked hard enough, but it never hurt to try and find some more. With how wild and unstable the world's ecosystem was, there was always the chance of some new monster immigrating to the area, and as long as it wasn't so dangerous as to kill any poor person to come across it, then there was a small reward for reporting it. But in his case, he was more interested in the materials he could get by hunting it. He hadn't been able to use anything really rare yet, and even though Falk kept some interesting stuff at the shop he could use, Ben was pretty sure he kept a supply of some really exotic materials somewhere that he wouldn't be tempted to put towards a staff that wouldn't last more than a day. He was happy to pass the time musing about what he would make when he got a little more money. His crafting skill was still low, but he had a lot of future plans growing in his head as his skills increased. He fantasized about a small and unrealistic list of things he wanted to see if he could make if he could get past his magic limitation: an actual moving picture, a golem, maybe figure out some modern weaponry for self-defense, a hot air balloon, and so on, when Myriad interrupted his thoughts in a panic. Then take Thera and run to the woods. You need to meet up with another group of adventurers now. I'll direct you on where to go. He didn't waste any time. Thera, my god, just contacted me and said we need to run. Follow me. He didn't know what was going on, but he wasn't going to doubt the urgency in Myriad's voice. He thought she would say something, but he started running, and she immediately took off after him. A message from a god wasn't something you just ignored. What's going on, Myriad? He thought in a panic. I was looking around the area, and you're definitely being followed by a tamer with an all-seer. I've been watching for a while now to be sure, but they're definitely following you. This guy has been hunting nearby for the last few days, but I thought it was a coincidence. Unfortunately, it looks like he's decided to close in now, and I'd rather not see you get torn to shreds. Wait, do you always watch me? How much privacy do I actually have? Ben, I'm trying to save your life. Myriad screamed in his brain before regaining some control of himself. I just checking on you while you hunt, since it's when you're most likely to get yourself killed. Otherwise, I don't want you too much. Even without other believers, I still have other things to do. Now turn right at 45 degrees and keep running. Our best bet is to get you to a group of nearby adventurers to help or hopefully scare them off. Will that work? Who can say? Better than letting them catch up with you, though. Wait, are they even after me? Thera's here too. What difference does that make? Well, if they're after me, we could separate and Thera could try to run for help. Huh, I honestly can't say. You two have been together any time I noticed them nearby, and I never investigated because I don't just check in on anyone who happens to be around you a bit too often. Besides, if need be, I'd like you to have someone else there if it comes to a fight. Especially since they're catching up. Fuck, how close are we to the nearest party? Maybe about 15 minutes, but this guy is only about 10 minutes from you. Okay, go about 10 degrees right again. There's a particularly dense section of woods over there. All seers depend almost entirely on sight, as their name would imply. I'm pretty sure it's tracking you through the footprints you're leaving right now, so by the time they get to you, you might be able to hide. Maybe. You don't sound too confident. I'm not. Ben desperately wished they had one of his bear traps on him. They always left them hidden under one of the trees near where they hunted because it was a pain to bring them out every time, but he would feel so much safer if he could place it. Of course, he also wouldn't be able to run with it, and a creature that was so sight-focused would probably be able to avoid it. But he was running for his life. He didn't need to be rational. As he desperately tried to figure out what to do, he made a decision. Gasping for breath as he said it, he looked at Thera running beside him. "Thera, send a quick prayer up to Myriad, please." She heard the urgency in his voice and did as she was told, but once done immediately asked him why. "Ben, I'm touched you would try to get me another believer before you pass. But I'm almost certain that if you die, she will too. Maybe if you survive, you could put a little more effort into it." "That's not what I'm doing." Giving an explanation to Thera and assuming Myriad would hear what he was thinking as well, he explained. "A god needs to be acknowledged to be allowed to talk in your head. If anything happens to me, Myriad will guide you to help. For now, Myriad, could you fill her in on what's going on?" "All right, fine." His god seemed to have hesitated for a moment before giving in, but Ben didn't have time to ponder why. From the way she almost missed a step, he assumed that she heard it too. This was probably her first time talking to a god, given that from what he knew they usually weren't as chatty as Myriad tended to be, but he explained what was happening and let Ben listen as he repeated the explanation for her sake. When he got to the bit about it being a tamer after them, Thera muttered between breaths, "Oh gods, it's him." Ben couldn't let the remark pass. "You know who this is? Is this guy after you?" A quick nod of confirmation before she added, "Though he's probably going to try to kill you too. And here I was so close to getting another believer. Now I'm going to lose both." Not the time, Myriad. It didn't seem like he had bothered to share his complaint with Thera as well, given her lack of reaction. "You're not going to have time to make it to the other adventurers. Things will be getting denser from here. Try and find a place to hide." As they ran through the woods, the species of tree had begun to change to one that seemed a lot more comfortable, growing closer together than in the surrounding area. But Ben had low hopes that it would help. It could be a large area, but surely anyone looking for them would find them soon. All he could do was try and find a place to hide, squeezing between trunks and trying to avoid some of the lower branches. This slowed down their progress significantly, but if they weren't going to be able to find anyone else, what choice did they have? As they moved deeper in, they found an area where the ground between the trunks was covered by waist-high shrubs growing around them. They could either walk through them and keep going or try to hide in them. "What do you think?" he quietly asked her. "We could try and lay low here or pass through. Maybe we could climb up a tree if we can find any sturdy enough. The branches on these ones look too thin, though." He was cursing himself for not thinking about it earlier, but it was too late now. Besides, that would have definitely left them trapped in one place. He didn't have much hope of Thera's magic saving them. By the time their pursuers got within range, they would probably get to them before she could activate her spell. "Let's hide for now. Maybe we'll get lucky." He really doubted it, but without many other options, they walked down into the bushes and sunk down next to each other. "They're a few minutes away. It looks like they aren't positive which way you went, so you should have a little while at least," Myriad said with a voice still filled with dread. "Thera," Ben whispered as low as he could to get her attention. "I don't know what you have against physical contact, but please try to ignore and take my hand. I have stealth, even though it's low. If I apply it to us, it should help at least a little." For a second, he thought she would go for it, but she gave her head a regretful shake. With a voice filled with pain, she spoke back. "I'm sorry, I just can't. Ben, in the interest of keeping you both alive, I strongly suggest you ignore what she wants and apologize later. Whatever her issue is, it's less important than keeping yourself alive." No matter how wrong it would feel, Ben was 100% sure Myriad was right. Even if he didn't remember his first death, one was enough. Besides, all he would be doing was breaking whatever small amount of trust he had managed to build, and he honestly had no clue how much of it he had even gotten from her. But that was the problem. No matter how small it was, he had spent over a month working hard to gain that little bit of trust. He didn't want to destroy it now, especially when it probably wouldn't be enough to save them anyway, so he gave another option. "Okay, then what about letting me enchant your cloak? I'll activate my stealth, and when I'm done, you should be able to activate it, okay?" "That won't work," she told him with a voice filled with sorrow. "I can't regulate my mana well enough for most enchanted tools. I basically just break the enchantment." "All right, then I'll apply it and activate it for you. I'll just have to touch your cloak. I won't touch you, all right?" "Okay, do it." She laid her arm out on the ground beside him, and he grabbed her loose sleeve, about to start when he felt something. An enchantment already laid on it. Why would this be here if she can't even use it? He thought to himself, before ultimately brushing it away. From what he could tell, it was a weak one. He couldn't even guess what it could be for, so he decided to ignore it for now. Instead, he focused on the task at hand and started. He activated his stealth and felt his mana move through him as he started to try and lay it over the cloak. He was trying to be as fast as he could. Every second counted here, so he stretched his energy to try and place the entire enchantment at once. It was then he felt a problem. Something he was deeply familiar with from all of his times using his skill to carve statues. He felt the enchantment break, along with the material it was being attached to. Long strips tore into the cloak, and he heard Thera gasp as he panicked himself. No. Why now? I haven't accidentally broken enchantment since I first started using this stupid skill. He was torn somewhere between screaming, crying, and needing to apologize to Thera when Myriad's panicked voice tore into his mind. Ben the All-Seer's attracted to Thera. It's coming right at her. You have to run. The sound of stomping feet and breaking branches suddenly filled the forest, and Ben didn't have time to ask how it was attracted. He looked at Thera and saw her panicking, the white skin of her arms peeking through some of the tears in her damaged cloak. He took a breath and prepared himself. Thera, run. I'm going to try something, so have Myriad direct you to help. She looked over to him, face still obscured despite the panic in her voice. What? No. You'll die. There was no time to argue about it. He stood up and faced whatever approached. Time would tell how this would turn out, and he began to truly lose himself in his feelings. He panicked. He didn't want to die. He knew there wasn't going to be a third chance at life, and he was afraid. He never saw the few friends he had in the world. He didn't want to go through the pain of something trying to eat him. The first time had been bad enough. He didn't want Thera to die. This stupid thing found her immediately after he broke her cloak. There was no way the two events weren't connected. He didn't want to die without making an impact. He needed to show all the assholes who decided he didn't have any worth that they made a mistake. Identity. A creature broke through the woods, unlike anything he had seen yet in the world. As big as a horse and with hideous rubbery gray skin. It ran towards him on 6 pointed legs and stared at him with dozens of horrifying mismatched eyes, none of which looked like they belonged to the same creature, before it opened up a jaw as wide as his head and lunged at him. Ben was scared to death. He had worked himself into a panic and was reaching an arm out at it as if that could stop it, but the monster chose to ignore it entirely, instead gouging its teeth into his unguarded torso. In the back of his mind, he thought he heard Thera scream. None of it mattered to Ben, though. The moment the beast pierced his flesh, he connected to it. Connect level increased. All of the panic, the fear, the regret, the pain. Everything got transferred over to the All-Seer, and the monster clearly wasn't prepared for it. Almost immediately it let go and began to run in the opposite direction, as if its life depended on it. At least it certainly thought it did. He briefly thought he heard another voice in the distance yelling at it, but Myriad was also screaming in his head and Thera was above him. Apparently, he was on the ground. Had he fallen when the creature tackled him, or after? Holding his thoughts was getting hard. He was pretty sure Thera was saying something, screaming it really, but he couldn't make out the words. As he gazed up at her above him, and thought he could just barely make out some of her features before everything slowly faded to black, Ben felt himself begin to come to consciousness. The pain was still there, but he decided to take that as a good thing. Pain meant he was still alive after all, and it had at least gotten weaker than when the All-Seer decided to try and make a meal of him, but he still didn't want to move much at the moment. He felt the softness of a bed beneath him and opened his eyes a crack to look up at the ceiling. Something seemed familiar about it, but he was still in a daze. It was hard to say for sure. He turned his head to the side to try to see where he was, when he found himself in a room with an albino gorilla quietly reading a book in a chair beside him. No, not a gorilla, a yeti. Fuck. He quietly croaked out. His throat felt dry, and it was hard to talk. How long had he been out? His teacher's head jerked up when he heard his name and looked at Ben, before running to the door and yelling, Sonia. Thera. He's awake, and rushing back to his bedside. Ben could hear the sounds of footsteps hurrying down the halls before Sonia burst into the room. He thought it was strange. He was sure he had heard the sound of more than just one person, and apparently she had thought the same. When she found she had come in alone, she marched back to the door, reached out, and dragged someone inside. It took a moment for Ben's mind to work out what and who he was seeing. At first, he thought he was seeing a statue of a member of Sonia's race. Skin that looked like it was made from genuine marble and solid gold, eyes lacking whites or pupils, with hair running just below her shoulders to match, and a thin tail wrapped around their waist like a belt. He wasn't originally able to put together what he was seeing. Why would a statue be moving? Or wearing fabric clothes for that matter? It took embarrassingly long for it to click for him before he looked into her eyes and spoke up. I'm glad to see you're safe. Sorry about the cloak. She noticeably grimaced and ignored his apology, instead turning to the other two. I told you he would be under my effects. I'll go hide on the other side of the house for now. Thera, it's perfectly natural for him to be concerned about you after what happened. Just wait here while we talk. Ben, honey, do you know where you are? Sonia asked, kneeling down to look into his eyes. Pretty sure this is your house, right? I was brought here after my Skrell incident. Do you have any water? He felt his throat rubbing against itself during that whole sentence. She grabbed a glass and filled it from a pitcher that was sitting just outside of his field of view. All right, you seem coherent enough. Can you tell us what happened? She gently questioned as he sipped on his drink. He went over the details he remembered in his mind before he started to talk. He explained how his god told them they were being followed while they walked by the river, how they had run through the woods, trying to get to some nearby adventurers but couldn't make it in time, so they had to try to hide. After that, trying to enchant Thera's cloak but messing up somehow and destroying it, and the monster, the Alseer, seeming to know where Thera was as soon as it happened and charging at them. Finally, he spoke about his desperate attempt to scare it off by working himself into a panic before connecting with the beast. And after that I blacked out, but I'm alive, which is pretty cool, he said, trying to give a confident smile, though it probably turned out more like a grimace from his general discomfort. Thera spoke up to the other two. See, he knew it was going for me, but he still stepped in and almost got himself killed. He's obviously being influenced by me. I need to go. Thera, the boy isn't being influenced by anything, Falk told her. Can you just talk to him? Excuse me, he spoke up. What am I supposedly being influenced by? Thera shifted about uncomfortably while everyone looked at her, Falk and Sonia clearly not going to give the explanation for her. Finally, she seemed to gather her resolve and spoke up. Ben, I'm a half-reed. Specifically half-earth spirit and half-succubus. My large mana and earth magic comes from my spirit heritage, but as for my succubus heritage, it gave me charm magic, and because of my large mana pool, it's significantly more effective than what a pure-blooded succubus would have. Without a resistance of at least 30 to it, you'll be taken in by its passive effects just by being around me, 40 if there's any physical contact. Usually this magic would just make people like you more and want to be around you, maybe be more open to answering your requests too, but since I have so much mana, those effects can also leave people mentally unbalanced and lead to an unhealthy obsession with me. Ben had a lot of questions now that she was finally being open with him, but he decided to put most of them to the side and focus on the matter at hand. Wait, I don't think I'm obsessed with you, but charm magic wasn't even an option on my card? Is that some sort of unique magic or something? Sonia explained to him. It's a specialized form of magic, specifically dark magic. He was still not as clear-headed as he would have liked to be, but he thought he saw where this was going. Wait, so my darkness resistance would apply, right? He saw nods from the two women before he turned to Falk and asked in a bit of an accusing tone, And why didn't you explain anything to your niece? He gave a bit of a shrug before telling him. Etiquette. Unlike a certain human that barged into my shop one day, most people don't openly share the entire details of their status with another. That's some very personal stuff after all, and in the wrong hands could reveal things you might not want others to know. If someone decides to share their status with you, you keep it to yourself. Ben sighed. He was pretty sure he had been told the same thing at the church, but he hadn't really cared. All right, well, can someone tell me where my card is? We can sort this out right now. It seemed that he had been stripped down at some point and was only tastefully covered by a blanket. Even if one of the people around was the healer treating him, he wasn't going to go and bear all at the moment. Sonia went to a desk by the side of the room before taking it and handing it to him. He gave her his thanks before revealing the information on it and handing it to Thera. She scanned it for only a second before reacting to something completely different to what he had been expecting. You're an apostle? She basically yelled at him. What? Both Falk and Sonia yelled as well before looking over Thera's shoulder at his card. So much for good etiquette. Boy, when in the infinite hells did you become an apostle to a god? I became Myriad's apostle right after you accepted me as an apprentice. What's the big deal? Ben, discovering someone's apostle is about as surprising as learning someone you know is actually royalty. There's only a few thousand of them. Sonia explained. Okay, I see what you're saying, But by that logic, shouldn't the fact I'm one of the 200 people that were summoned last year be more surprising? You're what? Sonia yelled again, though this time it was only her at least, so he tried to put the matter to the side. Okay, why don't we talk about how strange and unlikely I am later and get back to the matter at hand? Thera, if you want to look at the rest later you can, but for now just go to my resistances. She was still looking at him funny, but did as she was asked and scrolled down to look at his resistances. As soon as she saw them, she let out a small gasp. There's no way, she muttered. How could one person have resistances this high for every affinity? She looked up at him and stared him in the eyes. Is your darkness resistance really 85? Why not test it out for yourself? Is it okay to assume the main reason you don't like touching people is because of your charm magic? That's right. Well then let's see if it has any effect. He held his hand out towards her and waited to see what she would do. She stared at it for a moment before slowly and hesitantly reaching out to him and gently taking his hand. Even though Falk and Sonia believed it would be fine, they still waited with bated breath. Feeling fine so far, he told them. Charm wouldn't be very effective if a person realized they were charmed, she replied with a shake of her head and a thoughtful look on her face. I would need you to do something you wouldn't normally do. She thought on it for a moment, still holding Ben's hand, before giving him an instruction. Punch Uncle. Hey. Falk yelled at this, but they both ignored him. Ben looked down at their hands briefly before answering. Thera, you can't ask something so tempting after I find out he's let a misunderstanding stand between us for over a month. I'm going to want to do it. Still, he contained himself to prove that there were no passive effects taking hold over him. Though Falk still wasn't happy with the response. Now, what did I do? Even Sonia had to chime in. You could have at least mentioned to your apprentice that he might want to show Thera his card. He certainly doesn't seem to have any privacy concerns. Is it so wrong that I wanted Thera to try and open up a bit herself? He said in a huff. The girl needs to learn to put some trust in others. Well, maybe you're right, Sonia said after some thought. And what's done is done. Hopefully now that they're more aware of each other's circumstances, they'll grow even closer. She smiled and gave them a look as she spoke. Well, not so much them, but the fact that they were still holding hands at the time. When Thera noticed her cheeks flushed a light gold, making Ben wonder if that was the color of her blood as well, before she let go and took a couple of steps back. Well, she started, not making eye contact after being embarrassed by her aunt. I guess you really aren't under my influence, so that's good at least. Yeah, so when I'm in better shape we can go hunting again without worry, plus maybe now she wouldn't be so hesitant around him, which he considered a win. But as he brought up hunting again, the atmosphere darkened and everyone grew quiet. Guys? What's going on? Don't tell me I'm going to be bedridden for a while now. He was still sore, but he thought he could move if he had to. Well, quite a few of your bones were broken, and you experienced some organ damage, not to mention suffered some deep cuts where you were bitten, but most of the serious damage has been treated. You were out for a few days, and I had to call in all of the town's healers to look after you almost around the clock in that time, but you're out of danger now. After a few more days of treatment, you should be completely fine, Sonia explained. Oh boy, that sounds expensive, he winced. Well, it probably would be, but I'm friends with all of the town's healers since we worked together at the clinic, and I would never think of charging someone who almost died to save Thera's life. The issue is, she trailed off, not sure what to say, before Thera took over. The issue is me, she said bluntly. I'm currently under house arrest. What? Why? Using any sort of mind-altering magic on civilians or not properly containing a magic's passive effects tends to be illegal. Currently, I've done both. She looked away and wouldn't meet his eyes as she explained it. What? But we already established that your magic doesn't affect me. What's the issue? Boy, it isn't about the effect she has on you, but what she had on others. It isn't as bad as she made it sound. Things are just a little complicated at the moment is all. His teacher went on to explain what happened after he had blacked out that day. The tamer that set the all-seer on them had run off with the beast as it tried to escape, evidently worried about what could have been done to repel something that dangerous. But there was still the issue that Ben was laying on the ground dying. In an act of desperation, Thera dragged his body to the nearest party of adventurers that Myriad directed her to, and without having her cloak she charmed them. Given how easy it was, the party of 4 they encountered probably would have helped anyway, but that didn't change the fact that not only did she expose them to her passive effects, but willingly took advantage of it too. Making a mage with access to some light magic drain almost all of their mana to keep him alive, while the other 3 members carefully picked him up and ran him back to the town and through the gates, all the way to Sonia's home. Thera passed many people in the streets as they ran there, and even though she didn't do anything intentionally to influence them, many of them were drawn to her, some even trying to follow them along. After such a brief exposure, their minds cleared fairly quickly, and thankfully the party she manipulated were more understanding, and even after no longer being under her effects were willing to let the matter go since it was to save a life. But the damage had been done. The guards had come and were prepared to arrest Thera on the spot. If it weren't for the sight of Ben bleeding out and Sonia desperately trying to treat him as she sent for more healers, they probably would have. But they were able to see there was something more going on than just a person with a passive magic running wild, and waited until Ben was out of immediate danger to get the whole story. Once everything was cleared up and all of the victims' minds were no longer distorted by the charm effect, it was decided that Thera would not be held liable for what happened, seeing as she was attacked and trying to save a life, but that she would either be kept at home or was to return to the succubus nation of Analia until a time that she could get a new means to block her magic. Ben laid back down and stared up at the ceiling. So then this is my fault. Thera, who looked like she was trying to control her emotion up to that point, turned to him in surprise. What? Why would you think that? I'm the one who broke your cloak. It's what you used to block your charm, right? I knew I could feel some sort of enchantment on it, but I thought I could still apply my own and it would be fine. I have no clue what went wrong. Was I rushing too much with the enchantment? I could barely feel the magic in it, so I didn't think I would have to be too careful, but it looks like I messed everything up. You can feel the mana in an enchantment? Sonia asked, surprised. Well, yeah. I'd need to do that to be able to apply them carefully, right? Sonia's just surprised cause mana sense is usually developed at higher levels of a magic skill than what you have, but that doesn't matter right now. Don't beat yourself up about the cloak, boy. You didn't do anything wrong. It all comes down to the ways it's made, Falk explained. There aren't many ways to disrupt a passive magic effect. They all end up being either too hard or too expensive to make. In the case of Thera's cloak, it's a bit of both. The technique I used basically involved piling up fragments of skills instead of using the whole thing. Can't really tell you why it works. As far as I know, the person who discovered it did so by accident. But once you manage to pile up enough, it can disrupt passive magics like charm and fear. The issue is that even though it won't feel like it, the item that's treated this way is absolutely saturated with enchantments. Adding anything else will break it immediately. So it is my fault, he sighed. No, I should have realized. I just wasn't thinking. Thera jumped in, trying to take the blame herself. Both of you, enough, Falk firmly said. Mistakes happen in the heat of the moment, and you were being attacked. Stop beating yourselves up. Right. What happened to the guy who was attacking us anyway? You said he was after you, Thera. She seemed to want to retreat away even further, but still explained what happened. That would probably be Roan, an adventurer that's been exposed to my charm magic. Thera went on to explain her connection to the man who attacked them. When I first came to this town to try to grow my skills by adventuring, things weren't as bad as they are now. My magic was a drawback, but I was able to occasionally form some temporary parties and work on my skills a little bit, but that all changed when Roan got his eye on me. Most of the other adventurers thought he was a piece of shit, and he worked solo if you didn't count the few creatures he had tamed. He also came from a distant nation, but his people are perverts who thought that having multiple wives was some sort of status symbol, so he was always making a move on the few female adventurers around, which included me. It was something I could brush off, though, until one day he grabbed my hand when I wasn't paying attention. She took a small moment to collect herself here, having gotten a bit worked up in her explanation, before continuing. From there, I did everything right. I told him he couldn't make contact with me because I have a passive magic. I explained what happened to the guild so they could be aware in case he started acting strange, and they told him off. But he didn't take it seriously and thought I was just trying to brush him off, so he kept trying to get my attention that way. Guild employees would see, but a lot of them either never encountered someone with charm before or didn't appreciate how dangerous it could be to a mind, so they would just tell him off. They didn't really start taking the fact that it could be having an effect on his mind seriously until he started brawls with other people and loudly proclaiming it was to win my heart that they believed he was becoming unbalanced, and he disappeared after being kicked out of the guild for repeatedly disturbing the other adventurers. Of course, at this point the adventurers all think my magic is a curse I've placed on him, and that they're at risk too, so they steer clear. That Foxbat. I should have cracked the bastard's skull last time he came to the shop instead of just throwing him out. Ben was in complete agreement. Causing Thera to be ostracized was too much when the guy went mad from his own stupidity and an inability to acknowledge a basic warning. What's done is done. I just don't get how he could have tamed an all-seer. That's a pretty powerful monster, and he was only an okay tamer, she said thoughtfully. Falk groaned and threw his head in his hands when he heard this. I have an idea on how it happened. Before I knew what was happening with you, he requested I make him a staff that could hold the highest level of enchantment that I could. He must have found an enchanter with a high level of the taming skill and gotten them to apply it. It would explain where he'd vanished to these last few months. I thought he went to his homeland, but the bastard must have gone to find an enchanter in the All-Seer. Everyone relax, Sonia told them as she felt tensions rise again. We've already made the guards aware that it was Roan who probably attacked you, so he won't get into the town without being questioned. He was already known for his bad personality anyway, so there isn't much to worry about. The bigger issue is Thera's cloak. Falk, I don't suppose you'll be able to make another one before you leave, will you? He gave her a shake of his head. Not only are they hard to make, but I would need to get the right fabric as well. Otherwise, Thera wouldn't be able to see when it covers her face. I could at least start a temporary one with a worse quality material I have on hand, just in case of an emergency, but I don't think I could get it done before I leave for my client. He stopped regretfully before changing to a more thoughtful look. Of course, it's not like there's no one else who could do it. Maybe someone who's going to be bedridden for a few days, and even when he's better won't have much else to do since the shop will be closed and his adventuring partner will be occupied. Of course I'll make it. Show me how and I'll start immediately. Ben still felt responsible. If he could at least help a little, then he would do it happily. His teacher gave him a smile. Good lad. I'll run to grab some materials, then give you a quick lesson. And I need to go back to the clinic now that you're awake, Sonia said. When I get back tonight, I'll work on treating your injuries some more, but you'll be with us for a couple more days. Hey Sonia, I'm sorry to make this request after you've been working so much to heal me, but if I give you my address, could you stop by and give Frederick some water? Or maybe bring him here if it's not too much trouble, Ben asked as she was walking off. Oh God, you have a pet. The poor thing's going to be terribly dehydrated. I'll go right away. Oh no, wait, he said awkwardly. Frederick is my houseplant. In that moment, he felt like could have heard a pin drop from the sudden silence that filled the room and the panic that had filled Sonia when she thought his pet was probably dying evaporated from her body. Thera was the first to break the silence. You named your plant? Yes, and cut me some slack. I don't have any other way to train my connect skill, and it's not like I live with anyone else. Giving it a name made it easier to talk to. You talk to it as well? Falk asked. It responds a bit stronger to me if I communicate with it while connected. Please give me a break. The other three gave each other a look and mercifully decided to let the matter drop. Ben regretted bringing it up at all, but it would need to be watered, and it was his plant, damn it. He had some emotional investment in the thing. With that done, Falk left to grab the materials he would need along with a pile of books Ben could read while he was gone, and Sonia left for the clinic after promising to grab Frederick when she was done, eventually leaving him and Thera alone in the room. At a certain point after Falk had stood up, she had taken the chair in the room and sat in silence. Ben thought she might be wanting to talk about something else, so he waited for a few minutes before deciding to just broach the topic himself. Something else on your mind, Thera? She fidgeted for a moment, trying to find the words she wanted to say, before speaking up. After you're better, I'll talk to Uncle. He shouldn't make you adventure with me anymore with all this going on. She was frowning and wouldn't meet his gaze, but Ben had a pretty good idea of what was going on through her head at the moment. I see, he started. Do you not like working with me? He didn't really believe it was the reason, and she confirmed it a second later with the shake of her head. That's not it. But Roan's a violent guy, and if he gets into the town, you would be putting yourself in danger for no reason by being around me. Not to mention that ever since these curse rumors started to go around, Uncle's lost some business since it's pretty obvious to people how often I'm there. If you plan on starting your own shop one day, working with me could be a disadvantage to you. Well, first of all, I would never open a shop in this town. That would feel way too ungrateful to Falk for teaching me. Plus, I don't care what other adventurers think. You're the only one I really know in that crowd. As for Roan, well, I feel like you're in more danger than I am. I don't want you to encounter this guy by yourself after all. But more importantly, he paused to gather his courage for a minute. He was about to say something embarrassing and really hoped he wouldn't look as stupid as he felt saying it. I'm still hoping we can become friends. What? She asked, shocked by the unexpected proclamation. His ears were already burning, but he wanted to explain himself. I see. It's just, like I said before, I don't really know many people in the world, and I think you're nice. Plus, I feel like we already get along, and now you know I'm not going to be affected by your magic, so I would still like to adventure with you if you still want to work with me. He trailed off, his face burning and not even looking at her. After some silence, he was worried that she had run out of the room in disgust and worked up the courage to see her reaction. But she had hid it from him by burying her face in the covers of the bed he was laying in while he made his spiel. Thera. He asked uncomfortably. He honestly felt maybe her running out would have been better than the silence that had fallen. At least that would be an answer. Okay, came a muffled voice from his sheets. Huh. Yes, I want to be friends with you too. Gods, how can you comfortably say something so embarrassing? She sounded like she was dying from being so upfront about her feelings. I wouldn't describe how I felt as comfortable by any stretch of the imagination. I just don't know how one's even supposed to make friends with people, okay? Is it just like you spend enough time with someone and slowly get to know each other only to eventually realize you've both become friends? She was quiet but still didn't take her head out of the blankets when she spoke again. Well, I guess from that definition we're already friends then. It was maybe 15 minutes later that Falk came running back into the room with a crate full of supplies and books, only to see that Ben was still blushing and Thera still had her face buried in the bed. Am I maybe interrupting something? He asked with a raised eyebrow. Nothing, Uncle, Thera said as she jerked upwards, her face flushed gold. We were just chatting while we waited. Now come on, let's get started. He would have been willing to go up against the All-Seer again to dispel the current atmosphere, and thankfully Falk was merciful and let the matter drop. All right, boy, get ready for one of the most grueling tasks I've gotten for you yet. Here's some cloth, and just do what I say to make a Fanadale cloak. Ben was handed a square piece of cloth, about 1 foot by 1 foot in size, and immediately had questions. Isn't this a bit small? And what does that name even mean? The fella who invented it just named it after himself, as creatives tend to do, and that's just for your practice while I'm still here. Make no mistake, Brad, that small piece will take you almost a day to enchant if you're efficient. Prove to me you can manage it, and I'll prep a full cloak for you to work on while I'm gone. He looked at the small piece of fabric in front of him. If this would be a full day, then how long would it be to make the full thing? It was a daunting question, but it would be a good challenge, not to mention good experience for his enchanting. At the stage he was at, he wasn't using too many techniques more advanced than just layering them up. So what do I do? As I said before, you're just using fragments of skills. Not a single enchantment you add should actually be able to display its effects. It should feel more like making a sculpture from 1 grain of sand at a time, and much like sculpting with sand, if you're not careful, the entire enchantment will collapse. This won't break your material, thankfully, but it could still signify a significant loss of time, especially if you mess up toward the end. Now what you're going to do is only use your skills for this. Don't enchant attributes or affinities. If I remember right, you only have 7, which is going to make it harder than what most people who have to make one of these will deal with, but it should be manageable. You're just going to pile up a fragment of skill at a time until the entire thing is saturated, but you have to make sure none of the fragments are touching fragments of the same skill or it will collapse. Do you understand? I think so. He was a little overwhelmed by the sudden stream of information, but also sure he would manage. Good. I'll be in town for a couple more days, so I'll stop by to see how you're doing and if you need any advice. Last thing. Unlike the way you currently do your enchanting, where you have to finish the enchantment all at once, this way you can at least take breaks from it, thankfully, since it's building it up from many parts, so you won't need to stay awake for a week. Now good luck, and check some of the books if you need to. With that done, Falk went back to his shop to finish up some of the work he was going to show his client and bid both Ben and Thera a good day. After he left, Ben immediately started to focus on how he was going to approach the task while Thera went to prepare lunch. He thought she would be gone for a while, but only a few minutes later she came back with a small plate of diced vegetables for the both of them. He happily took the plate and began eating, but had to ask, "Are you a vegetarian by any chance?" She looked down sadly at the plate of food in front of her as she picked through it herself, letting out a regretful sigh. "No, it's just that this is all I can manage." "What do you mean?" "I can't cook all right." He hadn't been expecting that and immediately burst out laughing. "It's not funny," she said in a huff. "You try learning to cook something when your mana will strip the enchantments from the stove." He tried to contain his residual giggles. Admittedly, breaking any enchanted tool you try to use was a pretty good excuse for not knowing how to cook. Sorry, my bad. Do you mind if I use your kitchen? I should be able to whip something up." Her eyes seemed to light up. "You can cook? What's there to be so surprised about? I have crafting. It comes with the package. But you're always eating at food stalls. I just like trying different things is all." "Then that would be great," she told him before calming down. "Wait, no. Uncle Falk just said it's going to take you a day to work on this, and you're still recovering. I shouldn't waste your time. I feel good enough to move, and if it's already going to take a day, then what's another hour? Come on, show me your kitchen." "All right, let's go." She stood and waited for him to get up, but he didn't move. He cleared his throat and awkwardly told her, Thera, could you wait outside the room? I need to get dressed still." With the problem revealed to her, she quickly ran outside to wait, another blush spread across her face. Ben idly wondered if she was always blushing under her hood, or if it was just going to be today as she got used to him. After getting up and dressed, Ben came to an important conclusion. When Sonia told him that he was out of danger but would still need a few more days to heal, what that meant was that his organs were probably better, but his ribs were still very much broken, and as soon as he started moving around he could feel the pain from them. Still, it was bearable, and even if he could be satisfied with a plate of vegetables, he wanted something a bit more substantial after being out for a couple days. He made his way out of the room and was shown the way to the kitchen by Thera before he started rummaging around their cold box for ingredients, making sure to supply it with some mana after he was done so it would keep its power. He diced up some meat and started cooking it on the stove. It was here he had to take some care. With his low fire-based affinity, even using a fire enchantment could have a high mana cost, so he had to just try and keep an eye on it to make sure he would stay conscious. It seemed that since Sonia was the one who did the cooking and presumably had plenty of mana as a life mage, she didn't feel the need to spring for a stove with a fire affinity tied to the enchantment to lower the mana cost, and he was feeling it. While he was at the church still, Leahy had warned him about plenty of fools who had accidentally run out of mana while cooking and managed to burn their houses down or get themselves killed, and Ben was in no hurry to join their ranks. He would have to cook it a little longer than he would have liked to, but it worked out for his mana recovery. He just needed to have patience. Supposedly, he could also use his crafting to run mana through the ingredients to make them cook faster. The same way he could work with other materials faster by doing the same thing, but he hadn't gotten the hang of that yet. Probably because he was so focused on not using up all of his mana while he cooked. Once the meat was almost at the level of doneness he wanted, he added the veggies that Thera had cut up to soften them up a bit, while adding just a bit of water to the pan as well as some spices. He would have liked to make a thicker sauce for it, but he wasn't familiar with some of the ingredients they had and they lacked others he usually used, so he couldn't get too creative. But still, it was done. Thera pulled out a couple of bowls and they dug into the stir-fry Ben had put together. "It's good," she told him as she wolfed it down. "If we don't have leftovers, I'm usually just stuck eating chopped vegetables when my aunt's working late." "Well, thanks. While I'm here I can help out with cooking at least. Maybe we can get Sonia or Falk to grab some of the ingredients I'm more used to, or show me how to use the ones here. Then I can really get creative." "Sounds good to me," she told him as she continued eating. Ben smiled. It felt good to share a meal with someone. After eating and cleaning up, Ben went back to the room he had been given and started to figure out how he was going to try and approach this. Up to this point, he had never tried applying anything less than the totality of a skill, and he figured that would give him the most trouble, so he carefully attempted that first. He started to use his enchanting and decided he would try focusing on using a fragment of dismantling first and got to work, trying to feel the way the skill was being laid down as he went. Aside from his usual method or any of the ways he had read about but had only dabbled with, this actually took more concentration. Even if he stopped placing the enchantment almost immediately, it would create a small area that properly had a significantly weakened version of the skill. Much in the same way he would do when he was piling up enchantments to break a material for his statues. He just had to get smaller. The cloth now had 5 small sections enchanted with dismantling, a skill all but useless to have on a piece of fabric, before he finally got it right, creating a grain of skill that couldn't possibly affect anything else in a meaningful way. With that success under his belt, he was ready to start for real, but his practice created another problem he had to deal with first. Having practiced on the same fabric he was meant to enchant, Ben now had 5 sections he would have to remove the enchantment from, an application of his skill he understood in theory but had never tried before. After all, the basic means he used to enchant tools with his resistances wasn't complex enough to require correcting as he went, and when he would make statues, the point was for the enchantments to damage the material to get the end product. Freaking great, he thought to himself, and got to work, doing his best to remember how the technique was done and finding it coming back to his mind easier than expected. It essentially came down to activating his enchanting and using raw mana with it to pry it off. It was a tedious task, and the mana cost was higher than it would be to apply a skill or resistance instead, but his teacher only gave him the one sheet, so there was no wasting it. He didn't really think Falk would have any problem with giving him another, but it was a pride thing now. He wanted to get it done with the materials at hand. So he started his slow march towards completing his task. In the early stages, he tried to fail a few times, just to see what would happen. He applied the same skill fragments beside each other, curious as to what would happen, and it caused them to combine into a bigger one, destabilizing the fragments around them and erasing the enchantment. It was a curious result. When he layered resistances in the past, it had never happened before, making Ben assume that the skills may be uninclined to exist in a partial state, but once whole would destabilize the rest. It would be worth looking into more in the future, but for now he was content to know what would happen should he mess up, and began focusing on the task in earnest. Even with his focus and a generally patient attitude when it came to working on a task, he had to admit this was a bit too monotonous. But his teacher did say he would be able to take a break while he worked. He would aim for about an eighth done, and then stop to have a little rest. So maybe he went a little longer than the eighth he intended once he got into his groove, having gotten about a fourth complete. But he really needed a break now. He had originally been counting the number of skill fragments it would take to make, but he gave up around 300 after he lost count. It was times like this he desperately wished he had access to some sort of portable music player. Supposedly there were some magical music makers, but they were rare and expensive, not something he could manage. He felt he had a vague understanding of how record players worked. Maybe once he got some time he could devote some trial and error to figuring one out, but that would be once he had a stable income, long after he was done making this cloak. On the other hand, he knew Thera played at least one instrument. Perhaps he could convince her to practice while he worked. He'd at least broach the topic later. As he took some time to lounge before getting back to work, his mind turned to someone who had been mysteriously silent since his awakening. The one he would have thought to be the most invested, his God. "Hey Myriad, you around? I didn't die, so what's going on?" Silence. Ben let out a sigh. He knew Myriad had other things he would do in his free time, though he really wasn't sure what they were, and he had been a big help to Ben. He probably wouldn't have survived without the warning or his gift skill, so he should really do something to show his appreciation. It wasn't like he had started his quest yet. Maybe he should start with getting him a new believer. After all, now that Thera had spoken to a god and he had tried to save her life, she would probably be receptive. Maybe he should go ask her. "Don't," came a shout to his mind, startling Ben. "Oh hey Myriad, I was wondering where you went. I've been being chewed out pretty harshly for what happened, so I haven't had time to check in. The only reason they let me go now was because you were thinking of breaking my punishment before I could even tell you not to. Go back a bit. Who are you talking about, and what are you being punished for?" "Other gods. Well, mostly Theris, but the rest weren't too happy either. When you had her pray to me to open a channel, it was technically breaking some rules. I'm only being cut any slack because it was done to save her life and yours." "Wait, why was it against any rules? She acknowledged you, right?" "Sure, but it's a bit more complicated than that. She's already under the domain of a god. Directly talking to the believer of a foreign deity could be viewed as trying to steal them away." "What? We were literally being attacked. Where the hell was her god during all this then?" "Unfortunately, no matter how powerful a god is, we aren't all-knowing. A god with tens of thousands of believers will always have many things vying for their attention, and the fact that I was acting in good faith is the only reason I'm being treated as lightly as I am." "Okay if you say so, but I'm still not into it. So what's your punishment?" "You can't even really call it a punishment. It's more just a restriction. You can't try and talk Thera into worshipping me at all. Technically, if she chooses to herself, it's fine, but don't even bring the topic up. If she brings it up, just brush it off. I'd rather not make too many enemies up here." "So back to having no one in their right mind to ask then?" "Gotcha. Come on, man, you don't need to put it like that. Weren't you just feeling super grateful to me?" "You're right. Sorry. Not sure how much you've been watching, but things have been a little stressful. I've been busy. Catch me up. Can't you just see it in my mind or memories? It's not like I become aware of every detail of someone's life when I'm in their mind." "I hear conscious thoughts. Sure, I could probably dig a bit deeper after being acknowledged, but there's rules about that sort of thing. Not to mention it would be rude." Ben decided to file that away as something that could be useful later before getting back to the main matter, and told his god about the events of the last few days while he was unconscious and what happened after he woke up. "So you finally made a friend. Isn't that great?" Ben felt himself blush again as he remembered the embarrassingly honest exchange he had with Thera. Not really the main point here. Can you find this Roan guy? Not all-knowing or all-seeing, remember? Still, I don't want you getting yourself killed, so I'll at least keep an eye out to see if he comes around the house while you're here." "Okay. Thanks, Myriad. Of course, I need you to start growing my faith after all. Speaking of, I'll try and figure something out. The Connect skill did just save my life, so maybe there's an angle we can work there. Of course, that was a pretty specific situation, and I still almost died. Pretty sure most people would prefer a skill that could save them before they had something sink their teeth into them, but I'll see what I can do. No rush, just focus on staying alive in the meantime." More hours passed, and Ben made some significant progress when he noticed it was getting late and decided to go see Thera. He walked around her home to see where she could be before finding her in what seemed to be her bedroom, laying down with a book, so he gave a knock to get her attention. "Hey Thera, any idea when Sonia will be home? I thought I'd throw together dinner as a thanks for patching me up." "That would be great," she said and put her book down. "She's usually home in about an hour. Do you want a hand?" "Sure, sounds good, thanks." With that, they made their way to the kitchen and Ben started to dig around looking at the ingredients before deciding on making a ranunul soup and some stuffed crab, both dishes he learned while cooking at the church. He got Thera to cut all the vegetables they would need while he focused on assembling the ingredients and cooking. As they prepped the meal, they chatted about the day, Thera talking about the book she was enjoying and Ben discussing his progress on his practice and how he was understanding why the cloaks were hard to come by. It was hard to imagine too many enchanters wanting to make these regularly. Eventually, they moved on to talking about other things while they worked on the food and let the time pass until Sonia got back. When she walked into the kitchen, she was surprised to see them both at the stove, Ben powering it and working on a pan while Thera stirred a soup and gave them a greeting. "You know, usually patients are meant to rest and recover, but it does smell great in here." "Oh hey Sonia, you could say I'm recovering from practicing my enchanting technique all day. It's super monotonous. Besides, I wanted to thank you for looking after me these past few days. And you even got Thera to help," she said with a smile. "Hey, I help you sometimes," she spoke back defensively. "She was a great help. I'm sure if we can ever find a stove that can handle her, she'll be a great cook. Anyway, it should be about ready, so let's eat." They set the table and all sat down before digging in. Ben asked about Sonia's day at the clinic, and she asked what they had gotten up to before broaching another topic. "So Ben, how exactly did you become an apostle?" Sonia tried to bring it up naturally, though the curiosity had been at her all day. "Yeah, I've never met one before," Thera added. "It's nothing too exciting, guys. I'm pretty sure I got the role by default." "How could you possibly get such an important position with your god by default?" Thera asked. "I'm the guy's only believer, so there were no other applicants for the job, I guess. As soon as I accepted Myriad as my god, it showed up as my title." "Wait, you're his only believer?" Sonia questioned. "Ben, don't tell me you're involved with a forbidden god?" "As long as he's telling me the truth, then he shouldn't be." Ben went on to explain what his god told him when they first met, how he was the accumulation of his race's souls, and how his race destroyed their planet rather than let the invaders get it. Thera and Sonia sat and listened with an intense focus until he finished explaining his god's backstory. "Your god sounds insane," Thera remarked. "Are you sure you want to worship a god composed of a group that would blow up a planet?" Sonia asked. "I wasn't super into the idea at first, but he's a pretty good guy. Chatty too. I get the impression he may have been lonely without any believers." "If you say so," Sonia said a bit dubiously. "Though I still think I'll check with the church to make sure he's telling you the truth. But on a different topic, this meal was delightful, Ben. Thank you very much." "It's no problem. I'm happy to cook while I'm here if it can help out at all." And that brings up the next thing I was hoping to talk about. It should only take a couple more days to get you in top shape, but by then Falk will be gone and I'll be busy in the clinic during the days, so I'm a bit worried about Thera being alone while Roan is still on the loose. "I'll be fine, Auntie." "Maybe you will be, but I'm still worried." "Ben, since you're going to have to take a while to make the cloak anyway, do you think you could work on it here?" "You're welcome to help yourself to whatever's in the house, of course, but I'll feel a lot more comfortable having someone else around." "Sure. If you guys don't mind having me around, I'm happy to stay here for a while. With the shop closed, there won't be a ton for me to do other than work on the cloak anyway." "Excellent. Thank you so much," she said with a glowing smile. "And if it's all right, I have another bit of a selfish request to ask you as well, if that's okay." "Let's hear it." "I picked up your plant, and it's just at the front door. You can bring it to the room later. But while I was grabbing it, I couldn't help notice all the paintings and drawings in your room. Would you happen to be an artist?" "I guess I'm something of an amateur one. Yeah. Don't sell yourself short. I thought the portrait you have in your room was fantastic." "Oh, well, thanks," he told her with an awkwardness that she didn't pick up, though Thera did. "It's of my family. I thought it looked great. Is there any chance I could hire you to do a couple of paintings for me?" "Sure. After all you've done for me, I'll do them for free as long as there isn't a time limit." "What were you wanting me to paint?" "I was hoping to get a couple portraits together with Thera if possible." "What? Why?" Thera asked with a bit of discomfort on her face. "I'm not super into the idea of being stared at for hours to have a painting made." "Because it would make me and your parents happy," she told her before turning back to Ben. Growing up, we could never commission any family portraits because we couldn't find an artist who could handle her constitution, so her parents would absolutely love it. Well, sure, I'll be happy to. If there's no rush, could I put it together after I get the cloak done? That will be great for us, won't it, Thera? Thera, for her part, could see she wouldn't be allowed to get out of it and let out a long sigh. All right, sure. Once dinner was done and they'd cleaned up, Ben went back to bed to work on the cloth while Sonia sat nearby applying more life magic to his wounds. Ben was interested in watching at first since the last 2 times he had needed treatment he had been unconscious, but it wasn't anywhere near as visual as Thera's earth magic, with only a small amount of light being produced by the spell. So instead he devoted his attention back to his enchantment, pushing the limits of his focus as well in the hopes he would get it done by tomorrow. Eventually, as he was working, Sonia left, though that fact was only barely acknowledged in the back of his mind, and the hours passed as he concentrated on his enchanting before stopping to get some sleep for the night. When morning came and he woke up, he got back to it immediately and was able to finish it in a little over an hour before he decided to get up and grab something for breakfast. After having more healing applied to him, he was feeling a lot better, though still not in top shape, and was feeling ready to face the day. He knew Fox should be by at some point to check on his progress and hopefully have a cloak ready for him to work on, and in the meantime he leafed through one of the books his teacher had brought while he ate. It was a book on enchanting, one he had already read, but at the time he had thought a lot of the techniques would still be outside of his reach, now though he wasn't so sure. He was fairly confident that he would be able to twist and weave his enchantments if he tried. Unfortunately, there just wasn't much reason to. A skilled enough enchanter could do some interesting things, from lowering the mana cost of an applied spell to combining different skills to get certain desired effects different than what an individual skill could be capable of. But given that he had no magic and only a few skills, none of which he could see any reason to use together, such a technique was currently meaningless to him. His greatest drawback was not having grown up in the world. While an average person may have developed around 12 or 15 different skills by his age, even if most were a low level, just by living their life and having gone through a couple jobs by this point, he still only had a handful due to his recent appearance here. For his classmates, it wouldn't have mattered. They all had powerful skills that weren't affected by their lack of others, but for his enchanting it was brutal. With the few he had, he couldn't do anything complex with them, and the worst part was that he couldn't even get the most out of enchanting being a blessed skill. Normally, for every level of enchantment you could apply an equal level of a skill, but he should be able to get 50% more than that. At his current level of 2, he should be able to apply level 3 skills, but enchanting was already one of his most powerful ones, meaning he couldn't even use it to its full potential. If he wanted to get more out of it, that really only left 2 options. Either he could try and get more skills, or he could try and power level up one he already had. Both options had their pros and cons. While getting more skills would be useful, they would all be stuck at level 0 for a while at least. And while power leveling a skill would have its benefits, there was no telling how long it could take. Not to mention the only skill he currently had that could be worth focusing on would be stealth, and as useful as he thought it would be to get it to a higher level, especially after their run-in with the All-Seer. He didn't want to neglect his enchanting or crafting to get it up. He sighed and slouched back into his seat. He would at least try and find a copy of the Book of Skills and Acquisition Conditions from a merchant. He assumed it would be on the expensive side, but it would be immensely helpful to have the reference around, and now that he had been using his blessed skills for a while, he had a much better idea of what would be useful to him and what wouldn't. It was while he was dwelling on this he heard a knock at the door, and with Sonia already up and at the clinic and Thera in no position to answer it without a cloak, he went to check it himself. Opening it up, he was greeted by his teacher, and they quickly went back inside. "Everyone else busy, lad? Not sure a patient should be the one getting the door. Sonia's at the clinic already and Thera's still in her room. Anyway, I completed the piece you gave me if you want to give it a look." "Perfect. Then I'll give it a look over and show you the final step." "Final step? We'll get to that when I see it. Come on now." At his teacher's prompting, he hurried to grab it before going back to meet him in the living room and have his work reviewed. "Looks like you've got the technique down well enough. All that's left to do is seal it with an enchanting spell." Finally, something a little more exciting. He currently knew 4 spells linked to enchantment: harden, soften, strengthen, and weaken, and had practiced them all a bit from time to time, occasionally using them in his work too. Still, more of the more interesting spells had the same issue that he had been just thinking on. They worked best when used on enchanted skills than on their own. "Sounds good to me. What's the spell?" "Conjoin. Have you read up on it yet?" Of course I have. He'd read all of the books his teacher had made available to him by this point. He was actually hoping he could be provided with some new ones before he left. All right, good. So you'll just use your mana through enchanting to attach the fragments together, almost like gently laying a sealant over your work. Understand? Yeah, I got this. Ben did as he was told and started to form the spell, altering the mana inside of himself to give it the necessary properties. He was feeling impatient, which was why he hadn't bothered attempting it on something else first, but he was also careful enough to take his time with it and felt he had a solid understanding of the theory. It took a few minutes, but when all was done he had a completed Fanadale cloak. Well, Fanadale scrap. Perhaps he could sell the current piece to a rat as a cloak if need be, but as it was, Thera wouldn't make any use out of it. He handed it to his teacher, who gave it a look over on his behalf. Yep, looks like you managed fine. This should work perfectly. Oh, thank God. The thought of having messed up at the end would have been pretty unbearable, so having the success under his belt was exactly what he needed. Though Falk was quick to throw some cold water on his relief. Don't be too happy yet, boy. You're still far from free. His teacher reached into a bag and pulled out a long and heavy green cloak. When one compared it to what he'd already made, he felt his enthusiasm plummet. Oh man, this really is going to take a while, huh? Damn straight. And this one's only going to be a temporary one for her too. I'm probably going to be the sucker to make her main one after this, so don't worry and just do your best. Sounds good. His teacher seemed done with their business, but Ben wanted to ask for his opinion on a couple things before heading out. Hey Falk, are there any skills you think I should be learning? Well, since you're adventuring, you could start using a hammer as a weapon to try and get the hammer wielder skill. It will also help you out at the forge after all. But why? It wasn't what he was looking for, but still an interesting piece of information that Ben filed away to consider later. He would at least need to grow his strength a bit more before considering that. I'm more thinking about things I can use for my enchanting. The number of skills I have is pretty limited and none are great for it. Plus, I'm a little worried that I'm not using my enchanting to its full potential. I see what you're saying, but on the spot not much comes to mind. Magics are the biggest ones, but that's not really in the cards for you unless you learn a non-affinity magic, and those can be tough. Still, I'll think on it and try to have an answer by the time I'm back. Wait, that sounds great and all, but what do you mean by non-affinity magics? Aren't those just powerful evolved skills? He had read about them a bit in some of the books on magic at the church, but it had sounded to him like it was when a skill turned into a significantly more powerful version of itself with an increased mana cost to go along with it, such as stealth turning into invisibility. No, there's a few others too. Heck, your enchanting technically counts as one of them, though probably the least mana costly one I can think of. The issue with that though is most people don't bother with them at all, and those that do have already gotten a decent skill level in one of their stronger affinities to build up their mana and have a better idea on how to use it. Not to say you couldn't learn one someday, but you're gonna want your mana level a lot higher than it currently is if you do. Ben sighed and felt dumb for getting his hopes up. There still wouldn't be any magic for him in his immediate future, it looked like, though it would be worth looking into more non-affinity skills in the meantime. Just because it wasn't realistic at the moment didn't mean it wasn't worth aiming for after all. Don't let it get you down, boy. You just have to work to your strengths. You got resistance levels most people would only dream of in every affinity. If you were to specialize in enchanting armor and shields, you'd probably make a decent living. That is a fantastic point. Definitely something I could fall back on if I can't manage anything else, but the heart wants what it wants, and I want to make something exciting. Maybe I'll manage something eventually. They chatted for a while longer, and Thera came out of her room after hearing Falk's voice to greet him before he went off, letting them know he would be leaving tomorrow evening as he did. Ben prepared some brunch for them, and then chose to sit in the living room and work on the cloak rather than be cooped up in the room he was using. When she saw this, Thera decided to grab her book and join him while he worked, and it was like this the hours passed. His speed was a bit faster than it had been yesterday, with him feeling more confident with his technique than when he first attempted this, but progress was still slow, especially with how much more material he now had to work with. Still, he focused heavily on the task, not letting any distraction get in his way until he noticed he was starting to get hungry and stopped to see the time. Deciding it was as good a time as any to start dinner, he grabbed Thera again to help, and they chatted while they prepared the food, Thera again discussing her book, a bit of historical fiction involving a political tension between two races, and the forbidden romance that sprang between the prince of one nation and the princess of the other. Ben made an offhand comment on how the star-crossed lovers trope seemed to be one that transcended universes, making Thera quick to ask about the fiction of his own world and what he enjoyed reading. As they spoke, Ben found himself surprised to learn that while they lacked science fiction, they actually still had a form of fantasy stories, usually involving a person awakening to a previously non-existent affinity of magic and fighting off imaginary beasts that would exist in the myths of whatever race ended up writing it. How can anyone be sure these creatures only exist in myth? Ben joked. This planet's such a hodgepodge, I feel like you could find anything on it if you looked hard enough. Even if he meant it as just a casual bit of fun, Thera took the question seriously. That's actually a good question. It's not like the gods brought over entire ecosystems with them, but so many things ended up coming along and running off that it's hard to say what's living in the untamed lands. That's not even considering the fact that some of these creatures could actually exist in their race's original homeworld. There's a story from I think about 100 years ago where a writer from some race created an incredibly popular play that used a legendary beast, and their god stepped in to mention that they got the way it looked completely wrong, shocking everyone to learn that it had actually existed in their mother world. Who knows how many other legends are like that too. Okay, that would be pretty crazy. He couldn't imagine how he would feel if someone could prove to him that not only had dragons existed on Earth, but nobody managed to nail the look. It must have been a surreal experience for that race at the time. After that, Ben started to talk about different stories he had read and remembered well, then tried to explain video to her, a medium he felt this world was sorely lacking. When they finished preparing food and Ben felt a notification going off in his head. Max level of apprentice craftsman achieved. Well, hell. Really? Cooking a meal gave me the last bit of experience I needed. What are you talking about? Thera asked, confused by his sudden outburst. Looks like I've finally completed my current job. He casually told her. That's great. Why aren't you more excited? It is exciting and all. I'm just keeping my expectations in check for now. When I first got this one, it was the only option available. Who knows if anything will show up when I check this time. You were an apprentice craftsman, right? You should at least have the craftsman job now that you've finished the apprentice branch. Fair enough. Any idea where I can change it? There should be a room for it in the back of the guild. If you go and ask one of the members, they'll show it to you. Ben almost wanted to go check it out immediately, but he had told Sonia he would keep an eye out for Thera in the meantime, so it could wait until she was home. He enjoyed his meal with her before going back to work on the cloak, all the while hoping in the back of his mind that he would have at least a few more options available. When Sonia came back in the evening, Ben explained he wanted to go off to change his job, but she insisted on applying more healing magic to him first before he left. He was almost better, but she was adamant it wouldn't do for him to strain himself on the walk, so he gave in before heading over. It was his first time outside in days, and the fresh air felt nice. The sun was just starting to go down, but he enjoyed the last rays of light as he made his way over to the guild. Walking into the building, he felt the eyes of plenty of the adventurers fall on him as they enjoyed drinks at their tables. He chose to ignore them when he was immediately called out to by one of the employees. Ben, I'm glad to see you okay, yelled Unk, leaving the desk and running up to him. I heard what happened. Is it all right for you to be up yet? Hey, Unk. Yeah, I'm good. Sonia has been working on me for a while, so I'm just a little sore is all. Well, that's good, they said before lowering their voice. And do you know how Thera's doing? With everything that happened to you and the rumors going around, she's been arrested. She hasn't been arrested, he was quick to say. She's just not leaving her home right now is all. He didn't feel it was his place to explain that she was basically under house arrest, especially since it seemed she could leave once he finished her cloak. That's probably for the best until things died down a bit. But I'm glad to hear you're both okay. After the commotion you both caused coming back to town and the fact that neither of you have come to the guild in about a week, we were starting to get worried. Sorry, but we're both all right. It'll probably just be a couple more weeks until we start doing any requests again. Anyway, I actually came here because I heard you had a job change room somewhere. Oh yes, it's not very grand, but we do have a crystal in the back. Come along and I'll show you. He followed onto a back room, far more shabby than the one at the church where he acquired his first job, and walked up to the crystal, placing his hand on top of it. He hadn't been expecting more than just the craftsman job, but he found himself both pleasantly surprised as well as a bit confused. Available jobs: craftsman, enchanter, trap user, tree tamer. I get craftsman and enchanter. Even trap user makes sense considering how I've hunted for the past few months. But what the heck is a tree tamer? This deserves some proper consideration, so he removed his hand from the crystal and turned back to Ankh. Hey, I don't suppose you know what the job tree tamer's for, do you? They tilted their head in thought for a moment before giving an answer. I was under the impression that it was a dryad's racially linked job. Unfortunately, I don't know too much about it, but I know someone who might. Here, follow me. Ankh led him back out to the main room and pulled him through the tables of adventurers until he saw who he was going to and felt his stomach drop. He let out a small groan. Of course it has to be them. At the table in front of him enjoying their drinks was Sko and his two companions. They hadn't noticed them approaching until Ankh called out to them. "Pardon me, Sakel, would you mind giving us a moment of your time?" They turned to them, and the horned green girl, presumably Sakel, had been with some suspicion before answering. "Hey Ankh, sure, what do you need? Ben here is changing his job, but he got a bit of a unique option. We were hoping you may know something about it." "Well, I'm not sure why you think I would know anything, but sure, let's hear it." "Wait." Sko cut in. "If he wants to know, he should hear us out first." Sko, the snake-like Naga beside him, started in a warning voice. "Raylia, he's brushed us off every time we've tried to talk to him. If he wants our help, I'm not backing down now." "Really, I'm only looking for Satchel's help, but sure, I'll hear you out," Ben said casually. The three of them seemed completely thrown off guard by his sudden willingness to talk, considering how he'd ignored them up until that point. But by now he had a pretty good idea of what they were going to say anyway. Sko was quick to recover. "Well, maybe you're not a complete lost cause after all. Look, Thera's got some crazy magic that will mess with your mind. She used it to drive one of the adventurers insane. Hell, she just did it to the whole town a week ago. If you stick around her for too long, you're only putting yourself in danger." "Sko." Ankh yelled at him. "You know damn well things are more complicated than that. Thera's a nice young girl. I won't put up with you trying to scare off her partner. Understood?" "But Ankh," Sakel spoke up. Even if Sko oversimplified things too much, he's not wrong. Her passive magic drove Roan insane, and it took hours for people to shake their side effects after she ran through the town. He needs to at least be aware about it. "We all know that Roan was an unbalanced individual to begin with," Ankh argued. "Not to mention that Thera warned both him and the guild. She should not be held responsible for our failings. Plus," Ben spoke up, "the only reason she had run through the town like that was to save my life. Anyway, I'm already aware of all this. Is there anything else? 'Cause if not, I want to move on to my own problem." "Wait, you know? And you're still working with her? Just how deep has she gotten her claws into you?" Sko asked. "Oh, come on. Does he seem like he's reacting like someone who knows they're hanging around someone so dangerous?" Ben let out a long sigh and pulled out his card, for once taking care to hide all the information on it except his resistances. No need to make everyone aware of his status as an apostle. Sko, a toddler with a knife, could be dangerous. It's not going to worry me too much. Anyway, I can resist basically any passive magic from what I understand. He wasn't strictly sure if that was true, of course, but given the amount of mana Thera had access to, it still only resulted in needing a resistance of 40. He was comfortable making that assertion for now. He tossed over his card and let the three of them take a look, pretty much ignoring all of their mumblings about his resistances as they looked it over. "So it's all good, and we can move on, right? No, this is impressive and all. I'm sure you'd make a great tank with these resistances, but that doesn't mean you aren't affected by her," he continued on stubbornly. Ben had to wonder if all of this was worth it for info on a job he doubted he would be taking anyway, but Raylia came to his defense. "No, Sko, it does. Resistances don't count the same way for passive magics as they do for a regular spell. Instead of every 10 points of resistance weakening a spell's effects by about 5%, a passive magic can actually be measured to determine at what resistance level it wouldn't have any effects at. With the exception of some of the mana-based life forms around, I've never heard of anything needing a resistance higher than in the 20s. Sko fell silent once this was explained to him, and Ben found that was actually quite interesting to learn as well, enough so that he no longer considered the entire conversation a complete waste of time. Considering that Thera's father was one of those mana-based life forms, it probably contributed to her higher power as well, and solidified his theory that he was immune to most, if not all, passive magics. All right, well, now that that's out of the way, Sakel, can you tell us anything about the tree tamer job? It's usually a dryad-linked one, right? Ankh asked, bringing them back around to the original purpose of coming to their table. Hearing Ankh's question, though, she bolted up and grabbed Ben's hands. "You can become a tree tamer? So you awakened your skills into plant magic?" No, he said, unsure of how to react to the girl's immediate change in demeanor. "So you were able to get low plant magic then? I'm so jealous. It's so hard to awaken if your race doesn't have a proper affinity for it." "Wait, no. I don't have any sort of plant magic. For that matter, what is plant magic?" She let go of his hands and looked at him funny. You must have something. How could you have tamed a plant without being able to properly understand it? When she asked that, Ben had an idea on what he'd done, but he had to verify. Is plant magic something that lets you talk to plants? Among other things, but that's the aspect you need to use to unlock the tree tamer job, she told him with a distant look in her eye. Plant magic is something that will awaken when you evolve life, water, and earth magic together. Of course, there's also a small chance you can awaken low plant magic from training in those three attributes, and pure-blooded dryads have access to it from birth. She suddenly focused back in on him again and got into his face. So how did you manage to unlock the job without it? Raelia stood up and gently pulled her back a bit. Sorry about her, she said. Her dream is to awaken to plant magic one day, so she's just a little excited now. Raelia, you don't need to tell him that. I'm just curious is all. So how did you manage it? She asked again in a much calmer way. He didn't see too much harm in explaining. Actually, what he saw was an opportunity. I used a skill called Connect. It lets me link up to other living things and feel what they're feeling. I've been training it by holding conversations of sorts with my houseplant. Her eyes lit up in excitement. I don't suppose you could tell me how you got it, could you? If I want to awaken my skills, then being able to talk to plants already seems like a good way to do it. Kaus, I have no problem letting you know, but you may not want to do it. I got it as a gift skill from my god. Oh, she deflated a little. So I'd have to convert, and even then I wouldn't be guaranteed to get it. Well, that's not strictly true, he told her, preparing a small lie. You would have to convert, yes. But my god Myriad is one with only a few followers and values everyone he gets. When I converted, his apostle assured me that as long as his followers would make sure to pray to him every day, they would eventually get a gift skill. It only took me a couple months. Really? Her eyes lit up, though she looked conflicted. But changing my faith just for a skill. But if I really could get it in just a few months of prayer. I don't even know anything about this god. I'll think about it. She yelled. Would you mind if I ask you any questions I have about him later? Sure, I don't mind. You see that, Myriad? Look at me being a proper apostle. But his smug thought was met with silence. Of course, the time I actually do this is a time he's not watching. But anyway, back to Tree Tamer, could you tell me any more about the job? Oh, sure, of course. It's pretty much just a job that helps you understand plants. You'll grow a greater feeling for how to take care of them, as well as how to understand their needs. It usually helps you increase your plant magic if you get it. But since you don't have it, I would think it would provide bonuses to your Connect skill. Usually it's something dryads that want to care for their home forests acquire, but I think farmers get it too if they can to help produce better crops. That was actually super informative, thanks, and if you have any questions about Myriad, just let me know. I'll be happy to help you out. With everything he needed done, Ben left with Ankh, back to think on what he should pick. He started to walk back to the job change room and reviewed his options. Trap user could be fun, and he did hunt a lot, but if it just made him more successful at hunting, he didn't care too much. As much as he enjoyed adventuring with Thera at the moment and gathering his own materials, he wasn't sure he wanted to spend who knows how long leveling it up, not to mention that without combat skills it could still take an even longer time to complete. Tree Tamer was another interesting one if what Sakhel had said was correct, but maybe one he would leave for later in the future in case the main two he was interested in were dead ends after he completed them. Yes, the only options he was going to take seriously were Craftsman and Enchanter. Both had their positives and negatives as far as he could see. For Craftsman, he may be able to figure out a way to make better staves for Thera beyond just making them resist her magic more. The prospect of being able to make more complex things in general was appealing to him as well, so he was sorely tempted by it. On the other hand, it was an advanced version of the apprentice job he just had, so it would probably take longer to level up. Enchanter seemed like it could help him in the immediate future. He might be able to finish Thera's cloak quicker with the benefits it would give him, and maybe he'd be able to level up his skill faster, so he would be able to make a staff that could resist her magic more strongly. The issue was how useful it would be for anything else. Sure, he could just keep applying heavy resistances onto items to sell as his teacher suggested, but it wouldn't be good for much else. With no magic and no high-level skills, he just couldn't feel too much point in it. After minutes of agonizing over it and flip-flopping, he returned to the room and placed his hand back on the crystal, knowing his decision was made. Acquired job, Craftsman LV0. Bonuses granted to improving strength, stamina, and intelligence. All crafting-related skills will receive a growth bonus. Name, Ben Hef. Race, human. Titles, Apostle of Myriad. Jobs, Craftsman, LV0. Previous jobs, apprentice craftsman. Attributes, vitality, 160. Vitality recovery rate, 1 per hour. Mana, 84. Mana recovery rate, 5 per minute. Strength, 123. Agility, 84. Stamina, 576. Intelligence, 192. Affinities. Light, 3. Life, 2. Fire, 4. Water, 3. Air, 4. Earth, 2. Death, 3. Dark, 1. Space, for time, 5. Resistances. Light, 68. Life, 72. Fire, 75. Water, 69. Air, 66. Earth, 8. Death, 78. Dark, 85. Space, 63. Time, 61. Bless skills. Crafting LV2. Enchanting LV2. Focus LV1. Passive skills. Worldspeak plus. Active skills. Dismantling LV1. Stealth LV0. Connect LV1. Blessings. Myriad's blessing. The world spoke out to him, and it was remembering what it had said when he first picked the apprentice job that helped finalize his decision. It had said the same thing now. All crafting-related skills would receive a growth bonus, so presumably it was any skill that would result in a final product or be used with crafting. In that case, wouldn't enchanting count as a crafting-related skill? Sure, it wasn't a part of his craftsman skill already, but he couldn't help but think it was related enough that it might apply. Aside from that, he had been able to level it up just as much as his crafting skill while he was an apprentice craftsman, so even if this was just a theory, he felt it was worth taking the job anyway. With that finally done, he went back to the house for the night. When he got back, both Thera and Sonia were curious about what he had ended up choosing, so he told them he was now a craftsman and explained the other options he had available. They were especially curious about his potential to be a tree tamer, given that ordinarily one would need an uncommon magic variant to use it. But eventually the conversation died down, and he went back to working on the cloak before turning in for the night. "Oh, Ben, it's wonderful!" yelled a floating cube that appeared in front of him shortly after he had gone to sleep. "I received a prayer. It was just a greeting, but other than you and Thera, I don't know how long it's been." "Sakel prayed to you already, huh? Well, that's good. Look at me being a proper apostle and everything." "Yes, she mentioned she had heard about me from you. I was busy with another god, so I didn't see, but tell me everything." Once again, Ben recounted the events of the day, talking about his job change and the options available for Myriad's benefit. "So I was thinking we could advertise the fact that your gift skill may help lead to awakening to plant magic. That is, of course, if you think it's possible. I'm not going to go around lying for you. It's possible, but it's not a guarantee. From what I know, the more you come to understand the combined magic you're attempting to gain, the more you increase your chances of getting it. Having access to an ability and job that is closely tied to it could only improve your chances, so it wouldn't be lying, but it would probably be best to be upfront about the fact that it's not a sure thing. I wouldn't want any of my future believers to turn spiteful on me after all. Of course, the chances of awakening a skill are slim enough as it is that it probably wouldn't be a huge concern anyway. Okay, cool. Now I just need to figure out how to find people who want that magic. Who knows how I'll manage that? Oh well, I'll figure that out after I get this cloak done. When I do, you won't take too long to give any new believers the skill, will you? I told Sakel I got it in a couple months. I'd feel like a dick if I got it that fast since I'm your apostle and it will actually end up taking years or something. You don't need to worry about that. It's a bit hard to put in mortal terms, but I essentially have the blueprint for the skill now. Unlike when I was preparing it for you, I had to make it from scratch. A couple months should be a reasonable time frame, so long as they pray regularly. Of course, I'll end up pretty busy for a while if we get a whole lot of believers trying to get the skill all at once. Well, I doubt we'll have to worry about that problem. A god can dream. The next week was a dull blur for Ben. Falk left and Sonia finished his treatment, and Ben spent most of every day he had working on the cloak and preparing meals with Thera. While doing both things, he was constantly looking at his card, waiting to catch his level going up to see if there was only any growth while he cooked, or if he would improve his job by working on enchantment as well. It didn't take long to confirm his suspicions and convince himself that the craftsman job considered enchanting a crafting skill. Other than that, passing the time wasn't too bad. Eventually, Thera found herself bored of her books as well and started to come and chat with him while he worked, but it was still tedious. The days were blending together, and since he wasn't leaving the house, he had all but lost his sense of time. Surely there had to be a better way than this? His teacher had mentioned there were others, but he hadn't told Ben about them at all. Of course, if there was a better option available, he was sure that Falk would have done that instead of spending over a week making one of these stupid cloaks. Ben, Thera spoke up as these thoughts ran through his head. Everything okay? You're grimacing pretty hard. He took a break and felt his cheeks. He hadn't realized how tensed up he had been. This must have been getting to him more than he thought. I'm fine, sorry. Just understanding why these things aren't more common. There's no way an average person could afford the amount of time and effort that goes into one of them after all. Any enchanter that would want to make one of these would probably make a lot more money just producing a bunch of smaller, simpler things. I'm sorry to put you through all this work. Don't apologize. It's my fault I broke yours anyway. I'm just going to have to do something a lot more fun after this is done to blow off some steam. Oh yeah? What are you going to do then? She asked with a raised eyebrow. He thought about it for a moment before his stomach gurgles, alerting him it was time to cook something, but also giving him his answer. Let's go to every restaurant and food stall in town. I have to come too? She asked with a hint of surprise. Of course, you'll have your cloak then, so let's eat till we puke. A small laugh escaped her while she considered his suggestion. Okay, sure. I'm getting pretty bored being cramped up in here myself, but need I remind you I won't be able to see through the hood of this one? He gave a little shrug. Then I'll guide you. Anyway, speaking of food, I'm getting pretty hungry. Let's cook something up. What are you feeling? How about the salad you made the other day? The sea-tail one? Sure, we should still have the ingredients for it. Focus level increased. Of course it happened now, he said with a sigh. What's wrong? Thera asked, looking up from a game she was playing with Sonia. Nothing, just thinking out loud. Anyway, it's done. Hearing his words, they put their game on hold to rush over and give it a look. The appearance isn't going to change from how it's looked the last 2 weeks, guys. It was a nice forest green, and all in all a good quality cloak, but the appearance hadn't changed much at all. He wasn't sure how good their mana sense was, but he could only barely tell the particular technique he had used because he knew what to look for. To an average person with any mana sense, it would probably appear as if he had just laid a random skill on top of it without having any clue the amount of work it took. Still, its appearance didn't dissuade Sonia at all. That's wonderful, Ben. Let's see, it's a little late, but it should be okay if I grab a couple of the guards to verify it works. Wait here and I'll be right back, Sonia told him with cheer before running off. As they waited, Ben took her place in the game and kept playing against Thera. It was called Lomage and vaguely reminded him of chess. Each team had a piece that represented a different magic affinity that would move a certain way or be able to perform an action, as well as 10 non-mage pieces that could only move. By the time Sonia came back, he was fairly confident he had left her in a terrible position to continue the game, and Thera threw on the cloak while the guards waited to be let in. All right, Dubal, go in and let's see how it goes, said one guard to the other, forcing him inside while he waited a few meters away. What are they doing? Ben whispered to Sonia, unsure of how they were testing the cloak. Basically, a guard with a high resistance waits to the side in case anything goes wrong while a guard with a low one approaches Thera. If she can noticeably affect his will at all, the idea is the first guard can run and alert the others of the problem if it seems that they'll try something they shouldn't. She lowered her voice even more before continuing. Of course, if the cloak doesn't work, there's no way either of them would be safe from her magic, but it should be fine. Cool, no pressure. Now Ben was getting nervous. It would be a nightmare if he did something wrong while making it, and it didn't end up working. While they spoke, the guards told Thera to give an instruction, and she did. Jump 5 times. It sounded a little silly, but it was as good an option as any, and Ben waited with bated breath as worry started to seep deeper into him, but the guards stood motionless. They continued on with a few more questions and attempts for certainty, but with each failed attempt Ben was feeling more and more sure of the quality of his work. It was doing its job, no doubt about it. All right, everything seems in order, said the first guard. As long as you make sure to wear it properly, there's no problem with you going outside. I'll make sure the rest of the guards are aware of the results. Thank you both so much for coming on short notice, Sonia told them happily. It's no problem, ma'am. Now if you'll excuse us, we'll be heading out. You folks have an excellent night. When they left, Ben turned to Thera with a big grin on his face. So, eating till we puke? I'm having second thoughts, Thera said in the morning as they were preparing to head out. I'm not going to be able to see anything. This is going to be such a pain. Why don't we wait until Uncle gets back and makes me one I can see through? Thera, that could be a couple weeks. Besides, it will actually break my heart if the cloak I spent 2 weeks on never sees any use. forever waiting in a closet for an emergency that will never come. We have to go out at least once. Okay, fine. Just don't let me fall or bump into anyone. Let's just grab our food and come back here. Sure sounds good to me. They linked arms and started to make their way through the town, been making sure to keep a slow but comfortable pace for Thera to keep up with, and went on their way. They hit each stall they walked by, trying to take a loop that would bring them across all the ones he knew of to the biggest restaurant in the town, before making their way back to the house. Unfortunately, things typically went better in his head than in practice. Is something wrong? Thera asked him after the first few stops. She had felt his arm slowly tense up throughout the stroll, but with her vision obstructed had no way to see what was going on. No, everything's good, he lied. On the first few stops he noticed they were getting some strange looks, but he didn't think much of it. Now though some of the people were looking a lot more angry, and he had to remember that even if she was covered up, she was probably easily identifiable to the majority of people living in the town as the person always in a cloak with various scary rumors surrounding her. Given that some of these people may have even been taken in by her magic those few weeks ago, he had to wonder if she would actually be able to work in the town again once Falk was back and Roan was caught, so he decided to cut their walk short. Hey, I think we actually have enough food that we're going to be sick by now. 5 stalls is more than I thought. Oh, I was kind of looking forward to the takeout from the restaurant. Their food's really good. Oh yeah? Why don't we go when you get your new cloak then? You'll probably like it a lot more if you aren't stuffed while eating. Well, that's true. Okay, sounds good, but I'll be holding you to it. Hey, now I won't bail. I haven't tried any of their stuff yet myself. He tried to keep their conversation going while picking up the pace a bit, and made it back home. So are you going to tell me what happened? She asked as they were sitting down and eating, sampling a bit of everything. She was more perceptive than he'd hoped, but he still tried to brush it off. I have no clue what you're talking about. She silently stared into his eyes, waiting for a real response, and he let out a groan. Okay. I just wasn't getting the impression that people wanted us around was all. You mean people didn't want me around? She responded, putting her food down and turning away. Things will calm down soon, Thera. Try not to stress out. Will they? I'm sure everyone who wasn't already scared of me is now. And now I'm going to be stuck here alone until Falk gets back and sorts out my cloak. Hell, even when he's back people still won't want me in this town. But aside from Analia, this is the only place I have any close family. Even in Analia, I'll still be by myself. What about any friends in your homeland? My charm is so strong it beats the darkness resistance of the majority of succubi. I'm just lucky Auntie Sonia's levels of resistance are high enough that she isn't affected, and Uncle Falk got a high-quality resistance amulet made. A resistance amulet? He asked despite himself, only to immediately tell himself off. Clearly the time to ask that bin, you big dumb idiot. Thankfully, she didn't seem bothered by it. It basically just covers you in a layer of whatever the resistance level is on the amulet. It's usually hidden behind his fur. Still, it's not like everyone can have one of those things. She teared up a little and hid her face in her arms on the table. I never asked for any of this, you know. It's not like I want to have this effect on people. I know. Without any thought, he slid his chair over and gave her head a gentle pat, the same way he used to do to calm down his little brother when he got upset. I just want to be normal, she said in a much smaller voice. He didn't know what he could say to help the sad girl at his side, so he tried to reassure her the only way he could. Well, either way, you won't be alone here until Falk gets back. I'm still around, right? Didn't you agree to only stay here until you finish the cloak? She asked, peeking up at him. I'm sure Sonia won't mind me staying another week or whenever it is Falk gets back. Besides, I still have to paint those pictures I promised her, and anyway people are quick to forget. I'm sure in another week or 2 things will calm down. We'll see. Still, even if she didn't seem confident about it, she rubbed her eyes and sat up. I have confidence. Now come on, let's finish up here and do something. I still have to redeem myself in Lomich. She gave a small laugh. I don't think you could possibly manage that, but I'd like to see you try. That's 4 wins and 0 losses for me, she said, adding another tally to a sheet of paper. Thera, please. I'm asking you to have a little mercy on me and hold back a bit. No can do. You'll never get better that way. This is also only my 10th time playing ever. I need to work on getting my strategy down is all. Well then work away. Until a merchant passes through with some new books there isn't much else to do currently. Alright, fine. Just you wait until I make a chessboard or something. You'll be begging for mercy. He was terrible at chess too, but hopefully she would be worse. His proclamation only made her eyes light up though. Is that a game from your world? Yeah, it was a pretty popular one too. Honestly not my first pick for games I would make though. I just said that one because it's hard. Alright, You should definitely make some then. Will do. But if you want to do something different, aren't there other games from this world we could play? Surely with all the different races around, there has to be a good variety. There is, but boards and pieces and whatever else you need have to be made. And if the craftsman you get doesn't understand the rules, they may make it wrong if you commission it. Sometimes merchants bring some to town, but this place pretty much exists because it's on the way to a gate. Board games aren't a priority when every town is going to have access to at least a couple ones around. So chances of me getting rich off selling Earth games? Slim, but I'm sure any you try to sell at the next market will do well if you make some. Cool, I'll keep that in mind. As they were talking, a knock came from the door, and Ben went to check it while Thera went to throw on her cloak. When he opened the door, there were 2 guards present. Hello there, would Miss Thera be home at the moment? Oh God, what now? And if she is? He asked, a bit more defensively than he meant to. The second guard spoke up. You don't need to be so worried. There's just a problem we were hoping we could get her help with. It's rather important, unfortunately. Thera had heard what they were saying as she donned her cloak and slid up behind Ben. What could I possibly help you with? She asked in genuine confusion. We need you to come to the guard's room. Roan's been caught. I don't like this, Thera. We should head back. At least talk to Sonia before we go in there. Ben told her with apprehension filling his voice as they stood outside the guard's room. She responded with a shake of her head. Ben, if what he's saying is right, then I need to do this. I can't risk people dying just to avoid dealing with the guy. Besides, the guards will be in the room. Well, I will be too, for all the good it will do. Hey, Myriad, what's the word? It doesn't look like the man was lying. I was able to find about 30 beasts in the outskirts of the southern woods. Fuck. As the guards walked them to where Roan was being kept, they explained the situation. The man had simply walked up to the gate and demanded to be allowed to go through so he could see Thera. The guards were aware of him, of course, and not going to answer to the demands of a dangerous madman, so they had brought him in for questioning. He was happy to talk, even owning up to attacking them in the woods and running away once he failed, only to come back for his main plan, the one that would win the heart of the woman he thought he loved. They entered the main room and found Roan standing, chains around his arms and legs binding him to the floor. It was Ben's first chance to see the man, and he was taken aback. Roan was a hominid type, having a generally humanoid appearance, but his eyes were clearly compound, and his bare arms had a thick chitin shell on the top, with a softer flesh on the underside. What really unnerved him was how the moment Thera stepped into the room, his eyes were immediately pulled to her, as if Ben and the guards didn't exist. In the back of Ben's mind, he idly wondered how he was even sure it was her, given that she was wearing a new cloak and her magic couldn't be leaking through. But the thought passed when the sound of his deep, almost hungry breathing caught his ears. They stopped far outside of the man's reach, but Ben continued to hold Thera's hand as he had been guiding her, partly to support her and partly to make sure she didn't get too close. He couldn't help but not want her anywhere near the guy, and judging from how tense she felt, he thought she was feeling the same. Oh, Thera, it's been too long, he told her, seeming to be carving her image into his mind as he did. Hello, Roan. I was told if I came to see you, you'll put a stop to all this, she quietly responded. He licked his lips, and Ben found himself immensely grateful that she couldn't currently see through her cloak's hood. Of course, once I save the town, you'll be mine. I'll be sure to give you the top position among my wives. You deserve no less after all. Roan, how could you think leading a pack of monsters here could possibly win me over? She asked, slightly incredulously. Know my heart. You have it all wrong. I lead them here to send away, freeing the town of danger. A man who could do such a thing is quite powerful, is he not? Truly he would be fit for a woman such as you. He jerked forward and strained against his chains, desperately trying to reach her, but only causing her to take a step back behind Ben, and Roan's eyes moved to him. Just wait, Thera. I'll show you I'm more fit to be by your side than some filthy fucking artisan. You know who I am? He asked in some surprise. Sure, he had been attacked by the guy, but as far as he could tell, they never even got close enough to see each other. How could I not know the man who has the nerve to be with my woman? He snarled. If you hadn't run that day, you could have bled out comfortably, you know, fighting a man in a warrior's death. Instead, I needed to sick my pet on you. How did you even see me coming those times? I have friends in high places, he said as an offhand comment, before he fully processed what Roan had said. Wait, those times? When else have you attacked me except with the All-Seer? Wait, there had only been one other time he'd been attacked, and what he had thought had been a random mugging attempt. Apparently it wasn't a mugging or very random at all. That was you. So you didn't even know? Surprising. Though not as much as my surprise when I came back and saw you with her. Oh, I'm sorry, my heart. I know you said to leave, but I had to come back and see you, to gain the strength for what I needed to do. But imagine my surprise to see this man walking with you down the street. I couldn't just let it stand. Ben, what's he talking about? She asked him, grabbing his hand even tighter. Remember when I thought I was almost mugged a month or two ago? I think you saw when you took me to go and get a plant that day. Oh, I saw you. It gave me the resolve I needed. You're a desirable woman, Thera. I needed to make sure you realized you're already mine before another man tried to get you. Then why did you attack her? Ben asked with anger rising in his voice. Your stupid All-Seer could have killed her. IT was going to kill you, you insolent bastard. My precious pet would never possibly harm Thera. From the way it charged that day, Ben couldn't say he believed that. From what Thera had told him, he wasn't a great tamer. But then again, the situation they were currently in made him question how much better he was with a staff enchanted with high-level taming. It was hard to imagine a bad tamer could pull this off. He was about to retort, but Thera quietly stopped him. Ben, we just need to get him to send off his monsters. After that this is over, she let go of his hand and took a step forward, letting Roan see her put distance between her and Ben. All right, so I just need to watch you send away your beasts so you can prove yourself to me, and that's the end of it. And then you'll finally be mine. Thera said nothing to this, instead turning to one of the guards. I agree to accompany you for this. Take him to the south gate and let's get it over with. One guard left to call more into the room, removing the chains binding him to the floor while adding more to ensure he couldn't move freely, and walked him out, with Thera and Ben following a little ways behind to ensure he couldn't see Ben leading her by the hand. It wasn't too late in the day. There were still people up and around to see a group of guards moving to the south wall, pulling along a man raving like a lunatic. Oh, Thera, I don't even need another woman once I have you if that's what it will take to make you happy. I'll go through any shame. Nothing is too great. On and on he went as more eyes were drawn to them all, and Thera shrank down even closer to Ben. Even without being able to see the stares of everyone around, hearing his screams and declarations were enough to make anyone uncomfortable, but she suffered through it in silence, just wanting to get this over with so she could go back home. As they finally approached the gate, a number of the town's adventurers were already there, waiting and glaring at them. What's going on? Ben asked the nearest guard. With as many monsters as he said he's lured here, we need to play it safe in case he decides to attack the town after all. All of the available adventurers have been summoned here while we were bringing him over. When Roan saw the crowd of his former peers, he stopped his ravings and his face changed to one of rapture. Yes, this is the way it should be. Truly great heroic deeds and heartfelt proposals both need audiences. Thera, after the town is saved, everyone here really will know you're mine. No other fool will dare try something against the wife of a hero of Stonewall. Many of the nearby adventurers could hear Roan's deranged shouts and were making disgusted, angry faces. Most at him, but still a few found their way towards Thera, no doubt thinking she made him like this. For her part, she tried to remain calm as she spoke. All right, Roan, send away the monsters and save the town for me then. Of course, my heart. Bear witness to me. He took his staff from one of the guards and approached the southern gate, with Thera, Ben, and plenty of the guards following behind him. As Ben stared out into the field towards the forest, he didn't see any monsters, but Roan was quick to change that. Come out, my pets. He screamed into the night, as 5 swords wielded by a variety of guards were quickly pulled on him. What the hell do you think you're doing? The leading one screamed. Ah, my poor fool. Can it really be said I saved the town from danger if no one can even see the danger? As soon as they come out, I'll send them away, not to worry. Though as his pets started to pour out, worry they did. Myriad had been right. There were at least 30 different monsters, all of them different species and many of which Ben had never seen before, while most of them looked half-starved. There was no way to easily keep a herd that big fed by one person after all. Ben, this is bad. What? Why? But before he could get an answer, Roan continued on with his performance. Oh, monsters. Leave this land in peace, never to bother it again. He yelled out, as if he hadn't just called them all his pets only moments before. That's where the biggest issue began. Perhaps only 2 of the entire group left, the rest stayed, staring at the town. Roan clearly wasn't expecting this and grew agitated, yelling out once more. I said leave. Go off, you stupid animals. But no matter how he yelled, they weren't obeying. In fact, they started to take steps closer, walking towards the gate. The guards pulled Roan inside and started screaming orders, securing the man and starting to close the gate. In his head, Ben heard his god sigh. This is as bad as I thought. What's going on? Why didn't that work? A lot of reasons. Too many reasons. There's no way his attributes were high enough to make proper use of his staff's enchantment, and he couldn't have had time to train that many properly. Even with a high taming level, these things take time. Aside from that, look at them. Some of those things are half-starved. It's a miracle that Roan wasn't eaten by any of them. But now that there's so much food in front of them, they aren't going to leave on his orders. Then what the hell do we do? There's nothing you can do. I strongly suggest you wait somewhere in the center of town and wait for it to pass. Let the guards and adventurers deal with it. How many of them will die if we wait and do that? Okay, screw that. I think I have an idea. I already hate it. As some of the guards pulled a screaming Roan off to a cell somewhere, the rest gathered with the adventurers to form a plan, leaving Thera and Ben alone. This is all my fault, she said. I drove that asshole insane and now people are going to die. He didn't know what he could possibly say, so he didn't even try to raise her spirits, instead asking more important questions. Thera, are you all right with facing a bit of danger to try and help save the town? There's nothing I can do. Maybe if my magic was better, but I'm a level 1 Earth Mage, Ben. I can't save anyone. That's not what I asked. Are you willing to try? After a moment of silence, she gave him a nod. Yes. And will you trust me? A longer silence. Yes, I trust you, Ben. He smiled. All right, come with me. He took her hand and led her over to where the group of adventurers and guards were arguing over what to do. Let's just wait them out. For how long? They wouldn't obey their tamer. Why would they just leave? If we attack now, we may be able to catch some by surprise. Sure, some. But how many of us will die after? And what if they make it through the gate? We don't know how long we have until they attack, said a woman who appeared to have the most authority among the adventurers. If anyone has any options, say them now. Otherwise, we try to attack while we still have the light. I have an option, Ben called out from the back of the group. The woman eyed him for a moment, as well as casting a more complicated look at Thera next to him. And who might you be? Ben, 6th rank adventurer. Let me and Thera go around one of the other gates and try to draw as many as we can towards us. We'll bury as many as we can with Earth Wave. While we're doing that, any mages and archers can fire from the walls at the stragglers. An interesting idea, but can you do it? She asked. The young woman is known to have poor control over her magic, unless you're also a competent Earth Mage? Nope, just a humble craftsman. But unless you have any other viable options better than just attacking, you have nothing to lose from letting us try. The woman let out a sigh and rubbed her head. Does anyone have a better idea than letting these 2 idiots get themselves killed? Let them die, yelled one of the adventurers. It's the girl's fault we're in this mess anyway. The moment the words left his lips, the man was on the ground, a large rock having struck his chest and knocking him over. Ben had been looking at the woman the entire time, but was barely able to see her throw it. Listen up and listen well. The guild has already admitted responsibility for what happened with Roan. It's our fault for not taking the passive magic effects Thera warned us about seriously. As guild master of this branch, if you have a problem with that decision, you have a problem with me. Do I make myself clear? A variety of yeses, yes ma'ams, and other confirmation of her statement echoed from the surrounding adventurers. Good. Now, as I was saying, does anyone else have a better option? Silence fell amongst the crowd and the guildmaster let out a sigh. That's what I thought. All right, then try your plan. When it fails, hightail it back to the gate. Hopefully you won't die in the process. Not to worry, ma'am. We got this. Ben, what in the infinite hells did you mean we've got this? Thera yelled as they made their way through the western gate and headed south where the monsters were prowling. There's no way we can do this. Then why didn't you speak up? You were talking with the guildmaster. I couldn't just say anything in a situation like that. Well, it doesn't matter. Thera, I asked you to trust me. Can you still do it? I will. I just really hope we both don't end up dead for it. Especially since Earthwave is a high-level spell. You know there's no possible way I can cast it, right? Ben shook his head. Wrong. The only reason Earthwave is a high-level spell is because of its mana cost, an issue you don't personally have. How can you possibly know that? I've read up a bit on the 10 basic magics at least. Okay, but regular earth bullets break my staves. There's no way it can survive an Earthwave. They break the staves I can make. The last one Falk gave you hasn't suffered any wear and tear yet. And as much as I hate to admit it, it's the only reason this is an option. You should be able to manage. I'll just need to help. You focus on preparing the spell. I'll focus on making sure the staff won't break. There's just one more thing. Oh gods, what else could there be? I'll have to connect with you. She could only sigh. Fine, compared to everything else, it's not like that matters much. Well, we'll see, he said awkwardly. This will be my first time using the skill on a person since it leveled up, so it may feel a little weird. If it will keep us alive, I'll deal with it. They got within view of the monsters, but it didn't look like they had been noticed yet. Many of them had gotten fairly close to the main gate, though. Should here be good, do you think? Yeah, I think it will be good. Let's get ready, and once you're about to start the spell, pull off your hood to attract them. Okay. Alright, let's do this. Gods, this is crazy. She held her staff forwards, and Ben wrapped one hand around the staff and the other around Thera's hand. He took a deep breath and connected. The feeling was intense, like he was about to be blown away. The moment he connected to her, he felt a more extreme pressure than he had ever felt in his life, like he was trying to push off a car that was driving into him, and he realized he was feeling the force of her mana. He couldn't let it distract him, though, and he pushed his focus skill to the limits to keep his attention on everything. Thera's mana, which was nearly overwhelming, her emotional state, which was horribly scared from the situation she found herself in, as well as just enough trust in him to go through with his crazy plan, and something else, moving out of her and into her staff. Her earth magic skill. Ben felt it pass through the staff he was holding, more aware of the enchantments Falk had laid on it than he had ever been before, and knew that if he tried to lay a single strengthening spell on it that it would probably break. That was how many enchantments he'd forced into it to help make it manageable for her magic, so instead he didn't use his enchanting. He used his crafting, passing mana through it at the same time as Thera, and doing the opposite of what he would usually do as he forged something. Instead of making it easier to work with using his mana, he made it harder, selectively strengthening areas he felt becoming more fragile as Thera prepared her own spell, and draining his mana in a way that his low-intensity skills normally never would. She tore off her hood, and all the monsters turned at once, and as if they were a singular herd moved to run towards them, hunger in their eyes. They were far enough away that it would be a minute before the fastest one got to them, and they passively watched as the seconds ticked by, Ben remaining calm and focusing on the task at hand, ensuring that the staff would hold for the spell, but felt her panic begin to spike from the approaching horde. Thera, he told her with as much confidence as he could convey. You can do this. Her panic dropped slowly, and the burden on him to hold the staff together eased up as she got a bit more control of her magic. When the nearest of them was a short 15 feet away, she finished activating her spell. The earth rose up. Tens of meters of earth around them lifted from the ground and started to roll into itself like a wave, dragging each beast it caught in an ocean of dirt with it, and it didn't stop. The waves continued, flying out and devastating the land around them, altering the landscape and even reaching the town walls, tearing chunks out of it as it went. As dust filled the air and a scene of chaos and destruction appeared before them, the last staff she had gotten from Fox shattered in their hands, and no monsters could be seen amongst the carnage. Crafting level increased. Connect level increased. Oh gods, Ben. My earth magic level just increased, and we're alive, and we did it. She had him in a hug before he knew it, completely catching him off guard, but he hugged her back weakly. That's fantastic news, Thera, he said, only barely getting the words out before falling into her and losing consciousness. Ben cracked open his eyes to find himself in a familiar bed. He turned to the woman sitting in a chair to his side and spoke up. We really should stop meeting like this. I agree completely, Sonia told him. If only a certain patient would stop getting so injured all of the time. So what's wrong with me this time? He actually felt fine now that he was awake, and figured she had already done whatever treatment he needed, but he got an unexpected answer. Nothing was really wrong. You were just suffering from mana exhaustion. We just needed to wait for your mana levels to fill up and eventually wake up. Wait, how could I possibly be mana exhausted? I would personally like to know the same thing. I've heard it was possible to happen to people with no magic skills if they happen to use multiple other skills at the same time, but I've never actually seen a case in person. Of course, from what Thera told me and I've heard from everyone showing up, it shouldn't be too surprising. She gave him a stern look for a minute before softening up. You don't know how badly I want to be mad at you right now. You put yourself and my niece in extreme danger with that stunt. You both could have been killed. You're right. I'm sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. He didn't personally consider himself to be someone who would rush into danger. He felt like he'd been swept up in the moment, not wanting anyone in his new home to have to die. Sonia let out a long sigh. You know, I was expecting you to fight me a little, not just immediately give up like that. With everything else, how am I supposed to stay mad? Everything else? After the Guildmaster identified you as being mana exhausted, she carried you back to the house with Thera in tow before she had someone run to get me. Since you've been asleep, a lot of the adventurers who had seen you both fight came to convey their respects, as well as apologize to Thera about how they've treated her. It wasn't everyone, of course. Many people get stuck in their ways and opinions, but it looks like she has more people on her side now than when Roan started this whole situation to begin with. That's fantastic. He cheered before regaining his calm. And what about Roan? Last I saw, he was being dragged away. I'm not sure. They're going to send him off to try and get some mental help with a light mage, but it's hard to say how much of this was an effect of Thera's magic and how much was just him. Even if he loses all of the lingering effects her magic had on him, he may just be a naturally unbalanced individual. The proper authorities will be keeping an eye on him for a while. Anyway, don't worry too much on that. Someone's been rather worried about you for a while now. Sonia turned to the door and pulled Ben's attention to it as well, making him see a pair of golden eyes peeking through the side. I need to go prepare dinner. Why don't you two chat till it's ready? As she left, she ushered Thera in, and it ended with the two of them alone. Thankfully, Ben hadn't needed to be undressed this time, so he still had the dignity that came with wearing pants when he sat up. How are you feeling? She asked him. Well rested. Sonia mentioned things have been going well since I've been out. Her cheeks flushed a bit before Ben's eyes. Well, a lot of them were on top of the wall watching. Apparently, they started throwing spells when all the monsters got too close, but I didn't notice since it was taking my all just to use that spell. But everyone who saw it was impressed, and I guess it made some people reevaluate me a bit. That's great. Well, I'm pretty sure plenty of people still consider me the cause of all this, but I should at least be able to go outside again. She looked uncomfortable for a minute before speaking up again. Ben, I know you don't think this is my fault. It's not, he asserted as confidently as he could. I know you think that, she said with a small smile. I could feel your confidence in me when we connected. You didn't doubt I could succeed. Her smile quickly vanished. Which makes it worse that this really was because of me. Thera. Ben, let me talk, please. I want to explain myself to you. She took a deep breath. After Roan was kicked out of the guild, I intentionally used my charm on him. All right, he didn't see the issue. Is that really all you have to say? I mean, I'm sure you had a reason, right? Well, after he was kicked out of the guild, he approached me on an empty street. I was scared and I took off my hood, then specifically used my charm while yelling for him to go away. He immediately ran for his life. It had been so long since I'd seen him, I was wondering if he never stopped, that maybe he died running, but it looks like all it did was push him completely over the edge. Oh, that's pretty neat. I knew dark magic had a lot of mental aspects to it, but does charm include mind control? He asked with more curiosity than anything else, which bothered Thera in itself, but she still gave him a negative. Not exactly mind control, but it will depend a lot on the target's resistance and personal willpower. Roan's dark resistance seemed pretty terrible, and he was already mentally weak from being exposed to my magic repeatedly. I did this. Really? It sounds to me like a dangerous man approached you while you were alone, and you defended yourself. I personally don't see any problem with that. She looked away from him while he spoke. Sometimes I wonder if you aren't really under my magic's effect, you know. Why else would you keep defending me? Because you're my friend, he told her with all the seriousness he could muster. I don't know what friendship means to you, but to me it means I'm in your corner, and I'll have your back. If you do something I really think is wrong, I'll tell you. Hell, I'll give you a real earful if you need it, but otherwise I'm on your side. As he spoke, she started to blush again, but she turned back to him, not quite sure what to say. How was this boy so comfortable being upfront about his feelings so often anyway? Well, thanks. I guess I've never really had a friend who cared before. No problem. Now before we get up, mind if I try something? I guess not. What? I want to try connecting again. She seemed to hesitate a little, but decided to give in and reached out her hand. Okay, but I don't know how you can be so comfortable with this. I feel so exposed. He could only shrug. I've done it a lot, I guess. With a houseplant. A very nice houseplant. Now anyway, let's just try this quick. He grabbed her hand and connected, using his focus to its new and improved full potential while also enjoying the growth of the connect skill. When they were connected before, a couple potential ideas had occurred to him, and as excited as he was to test the first two, the third one was the most immediately important. He could instantly feel the extent of her mana again, but it wasn't as violent as it was before. His skill leveling up seemed to make it easier to bear. He also thought he could hear a small muttering coming from her and realized it must be the main purpose of the skill starting to show itself. Well, what should have been the main? As interesting as mind reading could be, it wasn't super useful to him at the moment, even less so if the other party could hear his thoughts as well. So he pushed it to the side for the time being, another thing to look into later. No, instead what he did was activate his enchantment. He didn't have anything he could apply it to, but Thera was wearing a plain shirt instead of her cloak at the time, so he just started to apply it to that. First trying to lay the entire enchantment down as he regularly did, but finding it wouldn't work. The size needed to be too big, which made the enchantment flimsy, so instead he stretched it out, forming a string with it as he went. And it was working. He felt it behaving as he wanted it to, felt the mana bending to his will, before his eyes widened and he pulled his hand away, leaving the enchantment unfinished and connection broken. What's wrong? You seemed so interested in whatever you were doing, she asked in surprise after having the connection cut off so abruptly. Thera, this is a little awkward to say, but I need you to change shirts and bring this one back here. She put her arms over herself and gave him the sternest, least impressed look he'd yet seen from her. And why exactly is that? I need a little time before I explain exactly why, but I was applying an enchantment to it. The thing is, the enchantment ended up being huge, and your shirt definitely isn't a material that can handle it, so I'll need to remove it before it breaks. She quickly looked down at herself before letting out a sigh of relief. Well, at least you stopped before anything unfortunate happened. But I like the shirt. Since you went and used your skills on it without even asking, you better make sure it's fine when you take it off. Yeah, sorry Thera, my bad. Well, as long as you understand. Anyway, I'll go change. You can worry about taking off the enchantment after we eat. Come on and get ready, she told him with a smile, brushing away the minor unhappiness she just felt, and he smiled back. Good food and company sound great right about now. Ben sat down in the library, waiting for Leahy to show up for their day of lessons. It had been a week since they started, and Ben found himself positively shocked at how boring it could be to learn about a new world. Leahy was trying to teach him what she thought would be the most useful for him, and aside from basic common knowledge, that meant focusing on the things he would need to know if he intended to pursue a career as a craftsman and enchanter. A part of him considered looking into a different job path than either of those, but he had to be honest with himself that without access to magic, this was the only path he could see himself wanting, even if it meant no one else in the world would need him. His friends had been right. These skills suited him to AT. Besides, it was also a bit too negative to say that no one else would need him. As long as he found a teacher in one of the nearby towns or villages, he could train up his skills a bit and hopefully find a small, quiet place that could use someone with his talents. He would never make it rich that way, and it wouldn't be glamorous, but Ben could see a peaceful life of quietly improving himself to have plenty of personal merits. Well, at least for as long as the world wasn't conquered, and given the track record of every race and god stuck here, Ben wasn't feeling too great about those odds. It was horrifying to think that hundreds of worlds had already been taken over, so he simply didn't, instead getting up to browse some of the different titles around. Exploring the library had quickly become one of Ben's favorite things to do. With a little over 2,000 books in it, about a third were dedicated to the various gods. Leahy had told him on an earlier day that they mainly had books focusing on the smaller gods, who may be harder to find information on than any of the more famous ones in the world, and with some of them not getting their own dedicated books at all, but instead being lumped together with the pantheons they originally ruled with. After that, there were histories of the various races from before they were brought here, or at least what was remembered. Many came as a last resort, not having time to gather culturally relevant information, or in many cases not even having been in a civilization where the written word had been invented yet. In both cases, that meant that scholars of groups that were already established on the world would come to record whatever they could remember of their own beliefs and practices. This in itself led to a rather distorted view of their own personal histories. In some cases, there had been warring between their own species when they were invaded, and through luck only members of one side would be saved, often leading to records that would state the savagery of their opponents as well as their conquerors. In other cases, information technology hadn't developed to the point on a given world that anything a person heard without seeing with their own eyes could truly be considered trustworthy. Even worse than that, though, were the cases where only an isolated group were saved, such as residents on a small island who weren't even aware their world was being conquered, right up until their god descended and carried them away, since it was unfortunately the safest choice to guarantee some survivors. Of course, with the gods around, they could clear up some of this information, but Leahy had quickly informed him that the gods weren't all-knowing either, and many of them had originally kept a much looser eye on their worlds, coming to guide occasionally and responding to large enough prayers, but ultimately letting their peoples develop at their own pace. There had never been any urgency before after all, so the information they could provide tended to be lacking. The last few books available to read were just an assorted selection of topics. The priests weren't expected to dedicate every waking moment to worship and guiding believers, though some did. The rest of them used their leisure time for casual reading and other hobbies. These were the ones Ben tended to lean towards the most. Sure, they may seem a little plain when compared to learning of gods and lost worlds, but he didn't exactly have the best opinion of the gods for dropping him here to be completely unwanted. Hell, if the world was really going to end in 3 years, all they had done was sentence him to a second death, only a little farther off then. Stop thinking about it. He wasn't going to fall down a depressive spiral. He was lucky to have a bit more time at all, and there was no guarantee they would lose. He was just being negative. He pulled a book at random from a shelf and half-heartedly flipped through it as he waited for Leahy to arrive, which only ended up being another couple minutes. "Good morning, Ben. I see you're making good use of your time before your lesson. What are you reading?" "Morning, Leahy. I guess I'm learning about a god named Slareth." Her eyes lit up when he said that. "Oh, a forest god if I remember correctly. Are you perhaps considering Dash?" "I'm not taking a god," he said curtly. It was a conversation he'd had with her before. "I'm just saying he may not be a bad choice. Slareth is a smaller god. You have a much better chance of getting a gift skill from him after all, and as a god who represents forests, it would probably benefit you if you were to work with wood or stone. If I find a god that really speaks to me, I'll make sure to consider it, but I was just reading this to pass the time." "So what's the lesson for today?" He not so subtly changed the subject, but Leahy let it go. It wouldn't do to force the matter on him, and it was doubtful if he could offer true faith to a god he was coerced into. "Depending on how you do today, it may actually be a shorter lesson. I'm going to try and teach you how to use your mana." "Wait, is there even any point? You already said I can't use magic, right?" "Well, that's still true, but there's more you can do with your mana than just magic. Magic just happens to be highly mana intense. However, all of your skills are going to use at least a little to properly power them, not to mention if you want to use any magic tools," she patiently explained to him. "Okay, sounds cool." It was already infinitely better than hearing about trade agreements and what nations and cities provided what resources. "How'd I do it then?" "We'll try the more peaceful method first. If you can't get a feel for it in an hour, we'll try and shock your mana." "Not really sure I like the sound of that." "What's the peaceful method?" "Meditation. Lay down and try to focus on the energies inside of you." "Lay down here?" "The library floor. It should be quiet enough that you'll be free of any distractions. Go ahead." "Well, whatever." The explanation sounded like hippie nonsense to Ben, but he would give it a try. Besides, he couldn't really call it nonsense when he'd already been shown that magic was real. He laid on the ground, closed his eyes, and tried to feel some mysterious energy inside of him. "Well, that was a bust," he said as he opened his eyes. It was a bit of a long shot anyway. That strategy works better for races that have an innate magic. Of course, it was supposedly a common way for different races to try to learn their magics before they came to this world, when full-fledged mages were more rare, but here with the system in place, magic is a lot more viable to learn if you have the proper affinity. And there are mages around who can awaken your mana for you. That sounds so much easier. Why didn't we lead with that? It can feel a bit unpleasant. You have to use one of the magics that can be applied directly to the body. Either light, life, death, dark, or time. Luckily for you, I have life magic. It and light are the most pleasant to go through. In desperation, you could probably awaken it with one of the affinities I didn't mention, but that would actually be even more unpleasant than having death magic cast on you. Why's that? From everything I read, death magic sounds pretty unpleasant to experience. Let's take my water magic as an example. It would be a little hard to use since it's bound to you, but high-level mages can move the liquids in your body. I don't think I need to mention just how watery that can be. Ben's first thought was having his blood messed with, but why stop there? Wasn't there also brain and spinal cord fluids in him as well? He had a small shudder. Sounds pretty dangerous. It would be, but it's also not that easy to use your magic like that unless you try to specialize in it, which is why even death magic is considered an acceptable way to awaken it, though admittedly it's the last choice for most. On that happy note, let's get started. Sit on a stool with your back to me. He did as he was told and took a seat. She pulled up a stool behind him, sat down, and pulled off his shirt before placing her hands on his back. Leahy, is it okay to do this in the library? I feel like it's not a great look if someone walks in. Ben, I may not look like it from your perspective, but I'm one of the oldest members of this church. I'd say it's more of an issue with how the rest of you hominid types age. You decay so quickly, she said, completely brushing off the idea that there could be an issue with his state of undress in a church library. Hominid types? He asked out of curiosity. Oh, that's just how similar builds are lumped together, races that look like you or me, although Father Yin would qualify too. There's not much of a strict definition, it's mostly a case of you'll know it when you see it. Anyway, are you feeling it? Feeling what? She sighed. I swear, why did you need to have such high life resistance? It's really going to cause any healer you meet some trouble. All right, I just need to up my mana flow. Let me know when you start to feel something. Ben continued to sit in silence, not perceiving anything with certainty no matter how much he tried, until Leahy grew impatient. Okay, you're going to feel this one. Sorry in advance. Wait, YH. His body fell from the chair and collapsed to the ground. Everything had pins and needles, and he had to talk between gasps of breath. What was that? Leahy herself seemed exhausted, as she was unsteady on her chair and slid down next to him, also out of breath. Sorry. I had to supercharge you with mana. Used up most of my reserves. Can you feel it? He concentrated and thought he understood what he was looking for. The tingling throughout his limbs was her mana. He just needed to keep the feeling as it dissipated to get a better understanding of what his own might feel like. He focused, not wanting to miss a thing, as the door opened. Another of the priests came in, one Ben wasn't familiar with, and after seeing them both panting on the floor and Ben without his shirt on, closed the door and left without a word. Oh, I am definitely going to be hearing something about this, aren't I? Now, Leahy, while I am aware of your actual age, you do know that not every priest is, correct? Yes, Father Yin, she said, an awkward blush covering her face and reaching the tips of her long ears. And Ben, did you not think to mention that finding a more appropriate place may be in order? I actually did. Yin let out a long sigh. I see. It seems young Ben isn't the one who needs lessons on the common sense of the world. Ben, for now retire to your room for the day. I'm going to need to have a long talk with your caretaker. Leahy shot him a pleading look which he pretended not to see. Of course, sounds good. You both have an excellent day. And with that he walked off, picked up a book, and enjoyed the rest of his day. After a couple weeks of talking to his client, having the item inspected and requests for improvements to be made, not to mention being given a variety of materials he deemed necessary to ensure it would succeed, Falk was finally on his way home. He left Craftsman Tower through the gate, coming out at the nearest city to Stonewall, and thought he would spend a little time shopping around before he found a cart he could take back home. After looking at some shops, he stopped in a cafe, got himself a drink and a snack, and made some small talk with the owner. So you heading out or coming back? Inquired a friendly mass of limbs of a species Falk wasn't able to place a name to. Coming back. I have a client I had to see, but gods am I happy to be on my way home. I'll tell you, some people are impossible to work with, no matter how well they pay. Oh, don't I know it? We get all sorts of interesting folks coming through. So are you from the city? Nah, I'm out in Stonewall. The hustle and bustle of the city ain't really for me. As Falk spoke, a few of the shop owner's limbs started twisting and shaking. Falk was no master of body language, especially when it came to other races, but he was fairly sure something was wrong. Hey, you okay? Don't need me to run and find a healer, do you? It was better to be safe and ask when you weren't sure about these things. No, I'm fine. So you only just got back today? That's right. So you haven't heard what happened then? He felt a lump form in the pit of his stomach. What are you talking about? Seeing that Falk didn't know anything, the owner explained what he'd heard had happened in the town about a week ago. Supposedly a tamer went insane and attacked the place, bringing dozens of monsters to destroy it in a fit of madness. They hadn't heard anything about a number of casualties, but in events like that there was an expectation that there would be some dead when he got back. The more he heard, the more he panicked. It must have been that bastard Roan, but what happened to Thera, Sonia, the boy? He couldn't take his sweet time anymore and thanked the owner for letting him know before finding the fastest cart he could and paying a premium to get back to his home. Usually it was a 5-day trip to the town for a more reasonable fare, but after waving some money around, Falk got back in 3 by the evening. He was let off by a gate far closer to his shop than Sonia's home, so he stopped there first, throwing open the door and calling out. It looked like Ben had grabbed some materials at some point, but that could have been weeks ago. Who knew where he could be now? Damn it all. I should have at least learned his address in case anything ever came up. All right, don't panic. Thera or Sonia should know where he is. He tried his best to suppress the thought that that would only be if they were okay themselves. He ran to their home and banged on the door, only waiting a few seconds for Sonia to open it. Falk, you're finally back. It's Dash. Before she could get the words out, he had her wrapped in a powerful hug, though being mindful to not injure her with his strength. Sonia, I'm so glad you're all right. Is Thera okay? Is Ben? Huh, what? Yes, of course. They're just in the living room. Falk rushed past her, not noticing the tips of his old friend's ears flushing as he did. He burst into the living room and felt his whole body begin to relax upon finding Thera sitting down with a book, and Ben laying face first on the ground, seemingly mumbling to himself. No, there's no way to make the enchantment smaller. I already took some of the most appropriate materials in the shop. Of course I tried that. Who do you think I am? Maybe need to wait for a level up. As the boy continued to mutter, Thera looked up from her book and, realizing her uncle had returned, got up to see him. Uncle, welcome back. Your trip was a pretty long one this time. As she walked by Ben, she gave him a small kick to try and get his attention. Ben, stop talking to your god. Your teacher's back. If that's what he's doing, I think it's okay to put a god above me, he thought, a mild worry of some divine retribution crossing his mind before he pushed it to the side. I'm just glad to see you're all okay. I heard the town was attacked and rushed back as quick as I could. Oh hey Falk, Ben said as he ended his conversation with his god and lifted his face from the floor. Good to see you. Sorry to worry you, but everything's fine. Sonia came into the room and he turned to her, not wanting to make either of the young folk too uncomfortable with what he was going to ask. And what about casualties? I haven't seen it myself yet, but I heard the southern wall was destroyed. He'd verified the safety of the people he was most worried for, but he had other friends and acquaintances around as well. It would be best if Sonia could tell him who had died so he wouldn't have to go house to house checking in on people. Instead, she shocked him. Nobody's dead and the south wall wasn't destroyed. It just saw a bit of damage when these two took on a herd of monsters. I'm sorry, I think I misheard. She couldn't be talking about the boy and his niece, but she just gave him a smile. Why don't we all have a seat and some drinks to catch Falk up on what's happened? As they sat around and caught him up, he became more and more shocked as the conversation went on. Roan was caught after almost destroying the town, and after a decision from his apprentice, he wasn't sure if he should call it bold or insane. The town was saved and nobody died. That wasn't even considering the fact that his plan had raised Thera's standing in the town considerably. Sure, some people thought worse of her, but pretty much any adventurer who had seen her use Earthwave had been talking about her powerful attack. Ben was basically forgotten about when people talked about the events of the day. And now here he was, only half listening to them talk about it as he scribbled and made notes in a notebook. Boy, what has you so occupied that you can't brag a little more about saving the town? Thera rolled her eyes. Don't mind him, uncle. After he woke up, he's been obsessed with some secret project he's thought of. He keeps pulling me in to help, and he won't even tell me what it is. Plus, all of his notes are coded. They aren't coded. These are just characters from my homeworld is all. Keeps nosy people from seeing my work before it's done. He gave both women a pointed look, and they didn't meet his eyes. Anyway, I promise I'll tell you both if it works. But I'm worried more and more it will be impossible. Then why have you been spending almost every waking moment on it? She asked him. He put his notes on hold and looked her dead in the eyes. Because if it works, the results could be life-changing. Anyway, Falk, are you heading out soon? Mind if I walk with you? Toss some ideas around. Sure. You got me curious, boy, so why not? I only rushed here anyway to make sure you were all safe, so I wouldn't mind turning in soon. Excellent. Then let's head out. Thera, Sonia, I'll be back in a bit. All right. Be careful out there, Sonia said as she waved them off, and Thera gave a much briefer goodbye, clearly unhappy that Ben was keeping this a secret from her. Hearing the exchange brought a different question to Falk's mind, though. Is the boy just living with them now? Aren't you all better by now? Are you still staying with them? Falk asked, deciding not to hide his curiosity. Oh yeah, Sonia was still worried about Thera, so she asked me to stay around, and Thera's still spending a lot of time inside. After all, the cloak I made doesn't let any light through, so I need to lead her around if she wants to go out at all. I'm just making sure she has some company. Falk smiled at his apprentice. Good lad. Now why don't you tell me what you're working on that's keeping you so busy? The sooner you get it done, the sooner Thera will be a bit happier with you, I imagine. Right. I think I may have figured out an easier way to restrain Thera's charm magic, he said casually, dropping a surprise on par with hearing the town had been attacked. Falk stopped in his tracks. Boy, I've said before that there's only a handful of ways to deal with passive magics, but that's not from lack of trying. Over a dozen races have some sort of passive effects they need to deal with if they want to interact with the larger world, and you're saying you figured out a method in the few weeks I was gone. I maybe figured out a method, Ben clarified. Unfortunately, it's proven impossible to test given the size of the enchantment. I would need to make breaks literally every single material I've tried it on, and try he did. Ben was more than a little worried about what his teacher would say when he saw some of the supplies he took and ultimately broke, but it was still less than he would have used to make Theris staves in that time, so hopefully he would get a pass. Falk for his part was at a loss. No wonder he wasn't telling the other two about this. No need to raise their hopes about something that was probably impossible. Still, if on the off chance it would work, he would do everything he could to help. All right, boy, tell me how you're planning on doing it. My enchantment's still going to be better than yours. I should be able to bind it to a weaker material, but Ben only shook his head. It won't work. To do what I'm thinking, you'd need to be able to feel Thera's ambient mana. Maybe there's other skills that would make it possible, but I only know for sure that I can do it with Connect. If I can't make the enchantment smaller, then I'll have to wait until my skill levels increase, not to mention that since it's an enchantment, Thera would have to be able to power it, which means making it robust enough that it could withstand her power, which means making the enchantment even bigger. If I had thought of this earlier, I would have changed my job to enchanter instead of craftsman. Maybe that would have helped. He spoke while staring up at the sky, filled with exasperation. His teacher's thoughts were in turmoil. He knew Ben was the only holder of this skill at the moment, and there was plenty of precedent for new skills being able to change the world. Wouldn't it be worth taking a little risk to see? At worst, he could probably get Thera's parents to replace anything they used. They got to Falk's residence and Ben was about to turn away for the night, but his teacher stopped him. Hold on a moment. What sort of item were you looking at using to hold the enchantment? I figured an arm brace would be good. While making something like a shirt may work a little better, any material I could conceivably make it out of would be far too rigid and uncomfortable for practical everyday use. A decent choice. Hold on for a minute. I'll be right back. His teacher walked into his home for a few minutes before coming back and handing Ben a small lump of metal and a stone. What is this? Silver and quartz? He asked. Try mithril and a white mana crystal. Ben almost dropped the items when his teacher told him that. Jesus, Falk. I knew you were holding out on me, but I didn't think you'd have magic materials just laying around your house. From what he knew, there were 9 magic materials that existed, 7 metals and 2 crystals, and even if the ones currently in his hands were 2 of the most common of the 9, Falk had handed them over like it was nothing. When you have things like this, it's better to keep them away from prying eyes. Even if those aren't too rare comparatively at least, and the costs have been going down over the last few decades, I'm still not going to just let anyone see them. Especially not an apprentice who may be tempted to use them for a staff that's destined to explode. Well, you don't have to worry about that. I don't actually think I'm comfortable using these at all. These would be the most valuable materials I've ever worked with. You have nothing to worry about. The crystal's already properly set, so you don't need to do much with it. Just attach it to whatever you make with the mithril along the rim. Ben took a closer look and saw that there was in fact a channel of mithril carved along the inside of the stone, but he still couldn't help but worry. God, I don't know, Falk. Do you think you could put the armband together? I only need to apply the enchantment after all. His teacher put a large hand on his shoulder and tried to ease his mind. Boy, listen up. If you intend to be a great craftsman, then you'll have to get used to handling materials like this eventually. I may be starting you a bit earlier than most, but I have the utmost faith in your abilities. Besides that, I basically got no sleep on the entire trip back, so I'm turning in. Just do your best. Ben was still staring at the items in his hands, but he had to admit, even if he was nervous, he wanted to give it a go. All right, Falk. In that case, I'll go for it. Stop by Sonia's in the morning, and we'll see how it goes. Wait, I didn't mean you have to work at it immediately, his teacher said. No time like the present. Anyway, have a good night. All right, boy, I'll be by in the morning. You better wow me. Ben went into the shop and started up the forge for the first time in weeks, having spent a lot of time either working on the cloak, hanging with Thera, or after the events with Roan refining his idea, trying to force a chance of success into it through sheer power of will. Now it felt good to be back, and his excitement was palpable. A few books on different materials were kept on one of the nearby shelves as a reference, but Ben didn't need to check on what to do. He'd already read them over multiple times. Mithril was a softer metal, better as a core in many of the items it was used in, if not just made into an alloy. But it had the excellent property of being able to absorb surrounding mana to activate and sustain any enchantments that were placed on it, or as a means to help the wearer of anything mithril regenerate their magic slightly faster. It was prized by adventurers for that particular property, but with a war coming, possibly as soon as 2 years off by this point, many nations were buying up all they could to use for their armies, making it harder for a common person to get a hold of it unless you could get in contact with a supplier. Ben had an inkling of how Falk managed it, but it wasn't immediately important. To do what he wanted, he would need a bit more material than what he had. So first he worked to make an alloy with it in copper, a metal that wouldn't dampen the mithril's absorptive effects. He heated up the forge before turning it off. The magics used to power it could affect the metal as it was being shaped, and once he was sure all of the mana dispersed, he put both metals inside to heat up as much as they could before he took it out and started to combine them, hammering and folding together repeatedly and reheating as necessary, having to repeat the process of turning the forge on, letting the mana dissipate, heating, and holding repeatedly until he was confident the materials were properly blended. After that, it became a matter of shaping his new composite metal, meaning repeating the same process again and again as he worked on it until it had the shape he wanted, that of a thin wire, about 1/4 centimeter in diameter. With his work at the forge done, he coiled up the wire and made his way back to the house to continue the process there. When he opened the door and went to the living room, he found Sonia and Thera playing a game of Lomage when he greeted them. "Done your secret meeting with Uncle?" Thera asked, some jealousy plain in her voice. Ben felt pretty bad about it. He knew she was bothered by the fact he refused to share what he'd been working on, which led him to making a snap decision. "Yep, I'm hoping to work on it throughout the night, so if it goes well, it will be done tomorrow. If it doesn't, then either I'm wrong and it's impossible or my skills aren't good enough yet. Either way, I'll at least let you know what I was trying." "Really?" Her eyes lit up, and she let out a bit more excitement than she probably meant to. "Then why not just tell us now, though?" He gave a little shake of his head. "I feel like that would only get my own hopes up. If this fails, then I can accept it and move on." "All right, fine. So when will it be done?" "I'll probably have to work through the night. Speaking of, I'll need to borrow your arm." "Okay, which one?" "Your choice," he replied, and she held out her left for him. "And is this going to take long?" "Oh, absolutely." And with that, he got to work. He was going to make her an arm brace with a technique known as wire wrapping, which involved cutting lengths of the wire and through a process of wrapping, tying, bending, and braiding, produced an intricate piece that would hold itself together. The main thing was shaping it in a way that would both hold comfortably to her arm, as well as being something she could slide on and off with enough ease should the need arise. Of course, aside from that, it was going to be something she would have to wear all of the time. It would also have to be aesthetic, so he did his best to find a good balance between form and function. He took all the measurements he needed to as he went, used some wire cutters he brought from the shop, and let his artistic vision take over, moving every wire as he thought would be the most aesthetically pleasing, losing himself in the act of assembly. He hadn't paid much mind to the time itself, and before he knew it, it was time to add the mana crystal. He had left a spot open in the top center, where the wires would be able to wrap around the mithril inlay to anchor it in place, and finally, he was done. A part of him actually wished it had taken a bit longer. It was a more enjoyable art form than he had expected, but he could always dabble with it more in the future, and it seemed that Thera was getting tired. She'd stopped supporting her arm long ago, instead just resting it on him as he worked. When he let go, she turned to him. "Are you finally done?" "Well, at least the first part. I'll have to harden the metal later so it holds its shape, but I should be able to enchant it first. So what do you think?" She stretched her arm out in front of her to give herself and Sonia a look. "It's beautiful," she admitted, "though I'd still really like to know what it's for." Sonia could only gasp at first, though. "Ben, is that what I think it is?" "That depends," he said with a cheeky grin. "Are you talking about the mana crystal in the center, or the mithril wire?" They both put on a stunned look when he said that. "Well, I just meant the crystal, but you used mithril as well?" "There's so much. What could you possibly be using this for?" "Well, it's a 50% mithril alloy, so it's not quite as much as it looks. But if I can't make my enchantment work on this, then it's going to be impossible." "Ben, what could you possibly be trying to enchant on this?" "I'm pretty sure fractions of the quantity you used are added to most weapons or armors to enhance their magical effects. Again, I'll tell you in the morning. Anyway, now all that's left to do is enchant it." "Is it going to take long?" Thera asked. "I would really like to get to bed soon. It will probably be a while, but I think you can sleep while I do it." "You don't need to connect to me for it?" "Then what were you doing on all of your previous attempts?" "No, I'll definitely need to be connected, but I'm pretty sure you can be asleep for it. It shouldn't cause any issue." "Wait now, hold on," she spoke with surprise. "That means you'll be in my room watching me sleep for how long?" "Honestly, probably a while, but it's not like I'll be watching you sleep or anything. I'll be focusing on my enchantment." Thera looked back and forth between Ben and Sonia, Ben showing a serious face, and Sonia trying not to giggle too hard from the exchange. "Thera, your mother and I always wondered what sort of man you'd first spend the night with. Please wonder something else." She responded with a shout before turning back to Ben. Okay, fine. Just don't do anything weird, or stare at me too much, or break any of my clothing with your enchantments, or do anything other than work on your project. Also, my door's staying open. Yes, ma'am. No worries. I am a picture of responsibility. Thera gave him a doubtful look, but didn't argue, instead getting up. Fine. I'm going to change. I guess come in whenever you want to start. He got up to follow her, but she yelled back. I'm in after I'm done changing. My bad. So he sat back down with Sonia, who was still stifling her giggles. I have to say, Ben, Thera's been a lot more expressive with you around. Is that a good thing? He wasn't really sure where this was going. It is, she quickly affirmed. Because of her constitution, even other succubi children often didn't have the necessary resistances to stay around her, so it warms my heart to see her have a proper friend, even luckier that it happens to be a nice man around her own age. Her smile seemed to be carrying certain implications behind it, which Ben elected to ignore. And I'm happy to have made a friend my age in this world as well. The first few months in this town, my only conversation partners were Falk and Myriad, so it's nice to have her company. It's still downright strange that you could consider a god a casual conversation partner, but I guess if you'll put her on the same level, then you're at least valuing her properly, she mused. Anyway, I'm sure she's all sorted. You should go in while she's awake. It wouldn't be a good look to sneak in while she's sleeping. Right, he thankfully wasn't that dense. Well, I'll see you in the morning then, Sonia. With goodnights exchanged, he grabbed a stool and headed over to Thera's room. The door was open, so he let himself in. Thera was laying in bed, her blanket covering most of her face, so only her eyes were peeking out, with a bit of a flush barely visible beneath them. She left her arm with the brace out over her sheets, and now Ben had to admit to himself that, yeah, this was definitely a weird situation to be in. Still, he tried to calm his thoughts, focusing on the task at hand, trying to steady his mind so it wouldn't disturb her rest. He put the stool down beside her and took her hand in his own, while placing his other one on the brace. All right, just try and relax, Thera. I'll try and make sure my thoughts and emotions don't distract you while you sleep. I'm perfectly relaxed. You just make sure you don't do anything weird. Promise. And with that, he connected. He could immediately tell that Thera was suffering through a range of emotions at the moment. Awkwardness, shyness, general embarrassment, and other emotional discomfort. He guessed it made sense. Just because they were friends didn't mean that she would be comfortable with a man sitting by her bedside throughout the night, so he tried to be as relaxed as possible to hopefully help her calm down, then got to work. The first thing he did was secure his enchantment to the armband. Then he began to pull and stretch it out. He was trying to apply two different techniques he was aware of, braiding his enchantments, to make it sturdier and ultimately easier to make than trying to form a giant layer all at once, as well as another he'd only learned the practical use for recently, which caused the enchantment to cling to a person, much in the way Falk protected himself from Thera's magic with a powerful dark resistance necklace. Ben, however, wouldn't be making it cling to her body, though. He would be attaching it to her mana itself. Ideally, the high level of resistance would act as a sort of filter for her mana, stripping it of the affinity that was mixed in, but he'd first need to overcome the greatest obstacle, the near-overwhelming size of Thera's mana. It was so large that he had to be careful with his own mana as he worked, making sure to work at a slow enough pace that his mana recovery could keep up. With that, a night full of patient working began. With great care, he wrapped his mana around her own, making the thinnest strand of enchantment he thought he could get away with, and after who could say how long started to thread it through itself. One of the biggest hurdles to the entire endeavor was figuring out how exactly he was going to braid it. He'd thought of a couple interesting solutions, but had to dismiss them out of hand, just from the size of her mana alone. After weeks of deliberation and discussing options with Myriad, they had chosen to settle on something that would resemble a monkey's fist knot. He'd made a couple for fun when he was younger and practiced with string to be sure he still knew the proper technique for it. It just so happened that the scale was on a whole other level. As the hours ticked by, he soldiered on, correcting any minor mistake he made along the way with a level of patience he could only muster when using his focus skill, and eventually he finished. Now all that mattered was if it would work. Enchanting level increased. Finally, he quietly sighed and prepared to slink off for the night. He most certainly wasn't expecting a reply to his casual thought, but one came anyway. That's what I want to say, Thera spoke, laying down still but eyes clearly open. Oh, sorry, Thera. Did I keep you up? No, I went to sleep fine eventually. I've been awake for over an hour. It's morning, Ben. He looked to her window and found that though the curtains were closed, there was indeed light leaking through them, gently filling the room. Wow, that took a lot longer than I thought it would, he said offhandedly. I'll say. At least you were lost in your own little world. I was stuck doing nothing the entire time, dealing with those two peering in on occasion and laughing. She sat up and Ben did his best to not pay too close attention to the pajamas she wore, something resembling a cotton nightgown, as she gestured to the doorway with her head. He turned to look and found both Falk and Sonia grinning. So how did that go, lad? His teacher asked him. I applied the enchantment. All that's left to do is see if it works. Should we be asking a guard again? No need. I whipped something up quick before coming here. I'll just need you to apply the enchantments. He pulled out a stick with 10 different pegs in it. When Sonia saw it, her eyes widened and she spoke out. Wait, Falk, isn't that dash? Why don't we let the boy save the reveal? Gotta see if it works first anyway, his teacher interrupted her. Now, boy, let's leave the house for a minute, and I'll tell you how to finish this, okay? Sure, can do, he said, not really understanding the point, but obeying his teacher anyway. They went outside and walked for a minute away from the house when Falk handed the stick to him. So what is this anyway? Ben asked. A simple way to measure passive magics. The only issue is you need someone with high enough resistances to set it up. Now link your dark resistance with the bind spell, and attach each peg to the base, increasing each time. Start at 4 and end at 40. Ben followed his instructions and did as he was told, quickly applying the enchantments, and then started to head back to the house and Thera's room. One by one the pegs began to fall as they got closer, making him realize how it worked while at the same time crushing his spirit. Falk, however, was staring at it intensely as they moved back to the waiting Thera and Sonia, eventually making it back to the room. Sorry to have wasted your night, Thera. It looks like this was a bust, he told them, filled with disappointment. She was going to ask what it was supposed to do anyway since she still wasn't in the loop, when his teacher stopped him. Not so fast, boy. Hand Thera that and let's see what happens. There was no harm, so he did as he was told and walked across the room to hand it to her. Of the remaining 4 standing pegs, one fell as he got closer, leaving only 3 remaining upright as Thera took the device. As she grabbed onto it, 2 more fell, leaving only 1 remaining. See, waste of time. Ben's thoughts turned to how good it would feel to waste some money on a street stall for some food right now when Falk grabbed him to get his attention. Boy, this is important. Did you only make the last peg reach 40? Yeah, of course. I wouldn't mess up on the only practical thing I can enchant, given that his max darkness resistance was 85, and taking into account that he'd leveled up, he could now enchant up to 51. His teacher's eyes light up hearing that. Then you did it. Infinite hells, boy, you created a new way to block out passive magics. What? Thera yelled, looking down at her arm. Falk, don't raise her hopes like that. Thera, I'm sorry. That was my goal, but it was a failure. It's nothing to be excited about. Nothing to be excited about yet, his teacher clarified. Boy, anything she touches needs just over 40 resistance. If the last peg isn't coming down, that means you've successfully blocked some of her magic. All that's left to do is experiment. First, we should remove the enchantments on that to do both the full range between the 26 and 30 pegs, as well as between the 36 and the 40 pegs. After that, do you think you could make another? I mean, sure. My enchanting went up after doing the first one, so hopefully I could make it a little more powerful if it really did work, though it will take hours. Hearing his teacher's enthusiasm brought back some of his own hope. Maybe his little project wasn't as much of a write-off as he initially thought. You told me you were wrapping it around the person's mana, right? In that case, I would say to do it on someone with significantly less to save time. At that he turned to Sonia. Wait, you have charm as well? But I've seen you walk around town without a cloak. She gave him a brief explanation. When you get to level 6 in charm magic, it's possible to suppress its effects. Unfortunately, until that point its effects only become worse, so it wasn't an option for Thera. I've spent a few decades myself to get to that point. I actually don't suppress it if I'm at home though. You just can't tell. So they had someone else to test on. Perfect. Alright, if I'm going to do this, I'll need a medium to bind it to. Falk, can you run and whip up an armband in the shop? If her mana is significantly smaller than Thera's, I doubt I'll need more mithril. In the meantime, I'll redo the resistances. Can do, boy. I'll be right back. With that, his teacher ran off and Ben started to remove the enchantments on the tool, while Thera was busy examining the brace around her arm. So this was your secret project the entire time? Sonia asked as she walked up to him. Why wouldn't you just say this was what you were working on? I just didn't want to raise anyone's expectations or hopes on something that probably wouldn't work. Hell, as far as I'm concerned, it basically didn't work. I thought that applying an equal level of resistance would counteract the magic since that's how it seems to work for living things. but it looks like I barely got a fraction of that. He wanted to wallow in self-pity over his perceived failure, but that wouldn't make things any better. Okay, give me a minute. I need to reapply the enchantments outside so they don't just break immediately. He walked out, then came back after the tool was properly set up and watched for any falling pegs as he went back. Just one. Just a single peg fell, meaning he brought her effects down to 27 at a distance. It wasn't much, but it was something, especially if he could improve it some more. His excitement started to rise again despite himself, and he handed the device to Thera. Again, only one fell. For both the effect at a distance and her effect on contact, he had been able to lower both by 3. It wasn't what he'd hoped for when he first started to set this up, but it showed his idea wasn't completely without merit. As he ran through possibilities where he could try to improve the design in his mind, Falk came back with a variety of braces, ranging from the same size as Thera's to just a couple inches long. All right, boy, think you could apply the same enchantment to all of these for Sonia to try? Wait, Falk, she interrupted. Won't this take days? Besides, I need to be leaving for the clinic in a couple hours. It won't take that long, and it doesn't have to be all of them at once, Ben explained. The reason it took so long with Thera was due to the size of her magic. I don't know how much you have, but as long as it isn't on a similar scale, it should be quicker. Here, let's grab a seat in the kitchen. If it takes too long, we can just stop and you can head out. They all moved to the kitchen, everyone excited to see what the result would be, and Ben got to work. He connected with Sonia for the first time, feeling excitement coming off of her in waves, but he ignored that and instead focused on making the enchantment, first attempting it on the biggest brace that Falk brought. Even if the time was flying by as he worked, Ben could tell there was no comparing how long it had taken to make Thera's to Sonia's. Her magic was just that much smaller and more manageable. Before he knew it, he had her mana wrapped with his enchantment, and he was done. He broke off the connection and looked at the faces around him, all looking on with surprise. What's with the looks? It was his teacher who took it upon himself to answer. Ben, that couldn't have taken more than 30 minutes. Yeah, that tracks, he responded nonchalantly. Sonia has significantly less mana leaking from her than Thera after all. I don't think you're thinking of the implications right now, but fine. Thera, go put on your cloak so Ben can set up the passimeter, would you? And Ben just set it up from 10 to 14 and 20 to 24, would you? They both did as they were instructed, though Thera was disappointed that she wouldn't be able to see the results for herself, and Ben set up the device. Sonia, could you release your charm? Let's see if there's any difference. Falk. I had stopped using it when Ben started on his enchantment. I didn't know if it would interfere at all, she told him, looking at the passimeter in Ben's hand. That was probably a good call actually, but he was eyeing the tool himself. Not a single peg had fallen. Ben, hand it to her. Sonia grabbed onto it, and they all stared in silence. All except Thera, that is. Can someone tell me what's happening? I still can't see anything. None of the pegs have fallen. Not even in the 10 to 14 range, Falk answered, looking to Ben. Boy, Sonia's charm is in the upper middle range of what succubi have, and you've completely blocked it. Okay, that's cool and all, but why won't it work for Thera then? That was the main reason he tried to make it after all. He wanted it to work out as well, though hearing this only made Falk sigh. The sheer scale of her mana probably causes it to leak through the enchantment. Boy, I get you haven't met your goal, but you really need to look at the broader implications of this. I told you before that tools that block passive magics are either expensive or take too long to make right. Yours just solved both issues. All right, but mine has a completely different issue. I'm currently the only one with the Connect skill. We would need others to get it as well as enchanting for it to have a real impact. Don't worry about that for now. There's a lot of other things we'll need to do first before we even begin to worry about that. Let's see. First, you said your enchanting level went up, right? You have to remove the enchantment you put on Thera's brace and try to reapply it. After that, I'm going to have to get in touch with some people and set up some meetings. But if we're going to try that, I'll have to finish Thera's new cloak. I should be able to get that done in around 5 days. Of course, we'll need to see if you could apply the same level of enchantment to some of the smaller braces and bracelets as well. Am I forgetting anything? Falk? What are you all talking about? Ben asked, unsure what to do about all of his teacher's mutterings. Don't worry about it, boy. For now, just focus on removing Thera's enchantment and starting a new one, the best you can too. We need to see how leveling up impacted your ability to make hers. Okay, sounds good, but there's one important thing I have to do first. What could you possibly need to do that would trump this? Sleep. I've been awake for almost a whole day. Staying up for another 10 or 12 hours to do that enchantment again is way too much. When he woke up, Ben was almost immediately put back to work. He tested to see the limits of how small of a brace he could make to hold the enchantment, finding that one about half the length of Sonia's forearm would work, though that would probably vary depending on the material used to make it. Once that was done, he removed the enchantment he'd made for Thera, then spent another night remaking it while she slept, much to her discomfort. After that, it seemed with his level up they were able to lower her passive magic effects to 24 at a distance and 34 on contact, both far better than nothing, but still outside the range a majority of people could resist. Still, it showed that as long as he continued to level up, he could potentially keep getting her magic effects lower, until a point that it would be more manageable. It would just take time and patience. After all of that was done, he thought he could finally get some rest for the day and went back to sleep, only for Falk to shake him awake around noon. Falk, not so close. Seeing what looked like a large gorilla right in front of him as he opened his eyes wasn't the nicest way for anyone to wake up, but the adrenaline flowing through him meant he wasn't getting back to sleep. What do you want? I got us an emergency appointment set up, his teacher said without elaboration. Get dressed and come with me. He didn't fight his teacher on it and got himself sorted, but when they left the house and said goodbye to Thera, he wanted a couple answers. So what's so important that you couldn't let me sleep? Boy, you really need to think about the magnitude of your discovery here. We're going to send an official patent with the Craftsman's Guild. We have one of those in town? He was sure he had a pretty good idea of what was around at this point, and he felt like he would have noticed something so relevant to his occupation. Not a dedicated one. It's at the Adventurers Guild. In smaller towns, there's usually just one building for the four main guilds, and since smaller towns are likely on the fringes with a lot of adventurers and only a few craftsmen, merchant, or mages that would need guild services, that means they typically end up as adventurers' guilds first and foremost. Of course, now we'll be getting you registered as an official craftsman, but that's not the main point of the visit. Before Ben could ask more about the main point, though, they had arrived and were welcomed by his favorite guild employee. Good afternoon, Ben. Oh, and Fox with you. It's been a while, Ank said with cheer to them, a greeting his teacher returned. Afternoon, Ank. Is Cecily available? I set up an appointment the other day. Absolutely, she's just upstairs. Go on ahead. Fox dragged Ben along, not giving him any time to ask any of the questions floating through his mind, bringing him upstairs and walking into a room to find someone Ben recognized behind a desk. The guild master. You could at least knock, she said, looking up from some papers to see who had barged in. Bah, you knew I was coming. It's fine. Besides, this is important. It better be if you're making me act in an official capacity for the Craftsman's Guild. When you insisted on this meeting, I had to review a ton of procedural documents on how I'm actually supposed to fill the role. You're not filling me with a bunch of confidence here, Cecily, his teacher told her, but she waved off his concerns. It's fine, but there's only about a dozen registered members in the town. They've never needed to use the guild for more than ordering supplies and books through. Hell, you know I got the job for my qualifications as an adventurer. Well, I'm sure you'll be able to help me out. I hear you met my apprentice. Ben gave a friendly nod, not sure what he was supposed to be doing at the moment as Cecily gave him an appraising look. Indeed, the boy that faced a horde of monsters and has apparently been hunting solo since he joined the guild. It was more Thera going against all the monsters. I was just support. Support is important, unless you can honestly tell me she could have faced all of those beasts without you there. He stayed silent. He knew that if he wasn't around and Thera tried to do what they had accomplished alone, her staff probably would have broken, but he didn't want to hawk up his own involvement in the event. He really felt he had only provided some help. The guild master looked at him a little longer, before turning back to Falk. So what was so important you set up an emergency meeting, Falk? If it was any of the other craftsmen in town, I wouldn't have cleared my schedule. We need to get my apprentice registered. He's discovered something big, and I want to get the patent for it in his name as soon as possible. A patent? She asked with a raise of an eyebrow. Don't get me wrong. It's impressive that a young guy like him could manage it. But why would that be so important? He's found a cheap and easy way to inhibit passive magics. She took a second to process what was said, but when she did, her eyes widened. Oh fuck. This is going to be a lot of paperwork for me, isn't it? Yes, Falk confirmed. Have a pen ready. Boy, outline to her exactly how you went about this. Don't spare any detail, no matter how insignificant. Ben did as his teacher asked, explaining his entire process in as much detail as he could, including his levels in each skill he used at the time to make it possible, as well as the fact that one of the skills needed to be granted by a particular god. Once that was done, Cecily addressed another matter. Alright, I'll have this sent off as fast as possible. Give me your card for now, and I'll register you as a member of the Craftsman's Guild. There are some fees, but they're small and will be removed automatically, so it isn't much to worry about as long as you have a steady stream of income, but we can worry about that later. For now, what's most important is if you want to register your name on the public documents as the creator of the technique, or if you want to remain anonymous. Well, what difference does it make? The biggest difference is just the sheer fame. If the world is aware you've made this, then a lot of countries are going to try and recruit you. Of course, this has positives and negatives in itself. If a country recruits you, then on the plus side, they'll start to offer you things like supplies, a fully funded shop, maybe even staff to work under, not to mention a large and stable source of pay. On the negative, though, anything you create that you'd want to patent, they would get a large cut of all the profits for funding your work. As well, you would most likely have to prioritize their work over any other. On the other hand, though, if you were to stay anonymous, your life wouldn't change in any noticeable way, except, of course, for any money you would make through your patents, which would be deposited in your card automatically by the guild. And how exactly do I make money from any of this anyway? Anytime a craftsman wants to make what you've patented to sell, they'd have to give 10% of their profit from the sale to you. This leaves the sell price of the item itself up to the individual craftsman, of course, but nobody wants to earn less money. You can be reasonably sure you'll be getting a good deal. There is, of course, the potential for people to simply give away items they've made, but as long as they aren't profiting, that is completely legal. As well, if a kingdom or nation were to have any commission from their personal craftsmen, then they would still have to pay a set amount towards you for the designs. This seems a lot more complicated than I expected. The gods who rule over crafting are very strict on the idea that people should be properly compensated for their works. As such, the head branch of the guild is quick to shut down anyone breaking the rules and profiting off of others' inventions and discoveries. Of course, this protection only lasts for 100 years, so depending on your race's lifespan, it may not seem like enough, but it's important to eventually let other craftsmen get their hands on them without having to worry about losses. Okay, cool. And if I choose to remain anonymous, can I change that at any time? Maybe not any time. You'd have to set up a meeting with a proper branch head, but it's not too difficult of a process. Alright then, I'll remain anonymous for now, as much as he wanted to show himself off to the various countries of the world and have them wither with regret over not taking him when they had the chance. If they started to show up now to offer him deals, it would honestly just sound like a pain in the ass. Not something he currently wanted, though maybe a bit farther in the future when he had a better idea of what to do in the world. A decent choice for now. Of course, if you're going to start selling them, then people will be able to figure out who the person making them is pretty quickly if they want to. No need to worry about that, his teacher interrupted. I've got a solution for him, so it should be fine. Alright if you say so, she said a bit dubiously. In the meantime, it would be best to research all of the limits you can figure out to the enchantment and file a detailed report. As promising as this looks, the findings are still pretty initial, and it doesn't sound like this skill comes from a very popular god, until any researchers figure out how to properly awaken it without converting. The number of people who will be able to make use of it will be pretty small. We'll see. Anyway, thanks for your time, Cecily. As I'm sure you can imagine, we still have a lot to do, so we'll be heading out. With that, they left the guild and Falk turned to Ben. Boy, pack a bag and do whatever you need to get done in the next couple days. I'm gonna have to send you off for a while. What? Why? You're going to Analia.